When we first heard Bill Kennedy, we're like, why the hell is he running for select board? He's in the neighborhood, you know. We all know him as the company guy next to the fire.
Right next door.
You know, it's like, why the hell would he want to be on the select board?
Put grumpy people on the select board.
Seal, will that happen? Yeah, there was motions. There was.
We can get started with those lessons if you like.
Yeah, I'm just loading up my Outlook.
Are we on air? I think we are.
And on this side.
They always seem to remind you.
Got Bob back there?
It's so much easier to tell after tomorrow.
No, we're not authorized. Okay, well, I'm going to put faith in Tim and say that we're on air.
Yeah,
Yeah.
all right.
Fair enough.
Do you want me to?
Tim says we're on, he said we are on air. The light's not working right now, but
Okay.
we're on
Okay.
air.
Forgot to pay the cable bill again.
All right. Well, welcome everybody. Thanks for joining us March 1st for our Peterborough Select Board meeting. I'm Tyler Ward. With me are fellow Select Board members Bill Taylor and Bill Kennedy. We have Ally Kreutz, Assistant to the Town Administrator, taking notes this evening. Town Administrator Nick stays at the main table, and along with Chief Walker. And tonight, we are on Comcast Channel 22 and streaming live on Ustream and hopefully the YouTube. We just had our non-public session, so now we'll reconvene into our public arena, and we've all been waiting for the reconsideration of our mask mandate, and then we'll possibly vote to authorize to enter into a drinking water and groundwater trust fund grant agreement with New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services for the Cold Stone Springs project. And then we'll hear about Soul Smart designation, which is an interesting program. You'll hear about that. And then we'll possibly vote to approve some minutes when we reconvene with the Budget Committee later on the meeting. So, Chief Walker.
Hey, y'all. So, I forget what it was a few months ago. We got together, we were sort of looking at the Omicron surge and sort of everything that's going on both locally, statewide, nationwide, and at the urging of the board and, agreement, we passed a resolution, and along with that, also a mandate to require masking in all public spaces within town buildings, and any public meetings and so forth. As you know, the case numbers have come down considerably since then. That's not to say we're out of the woods yet or it's over. The other thing that has changed is the hospitalization numbers are down. Along with that is the guidance that the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention have changed last week, no longer looking at just case count, but also looking at rates as well as hospitalizations and so forth. And they've gone to a three-tiered system, which is an orange, yellow, green, and looking at that. And there, subsequently, actually prior to that coming out, Governor Sununu held a press conference in which he sort of surprised folks by announcing that he was removing the mandate at all state facilities, as well as, along with that, anything that came along that was directly associated with that. A good example is public schools. There have been public schools that then eliminated the ability of school districts to have a mask mandate, which if you read the article that was in the ledger transcript, led to a lot of consternation through some districts that were, quite frankly, caught off guard. So sort of where we are now is, as a select board, when you had originally had that discussion, you looked at, knowing you were reconvening on March 1st being the day that would expire, giving you folks an opportunity to reconsider it based on where we were. My own thoughts and recommendations based on what's going on is to look at, getting away from a mandate and always masks being optional. I think that I am comfortable saying we're at a point where as there were individuals who during flu and cold season, or, cold and flu season would wear masks, I think we're going to see more of that. I still encourage people to be vaccinated. As with anything, if you don't feel well, stay home and look at that. But I think that we're at a point where in our own community where we can, at least in town buildings, move to go to an optional situation for masks. Again, I think that, it is up to you folks as a board, but I think following along where, well, the state of New Hampshire is, as well as the updated CDC guidance, that I think at this point in time is a fair request.
I make a motion that we remove the mask mandate as of midnight.
As of midnight?
Yep.
All right, can we have a second?
I'll second that motion. I would like to make some comment.
Sure.
As I understand, Chief, we're in the middle range. We're in the
Yes, we
yellow.
are. Yeah.
We're moderate.
So in and again, I'm not fully versed in this because it's relatively new and I'm focused on a few other things the last couple of days, but in the yellow range really is anybody who is at high risk. So your high-risk individuals, people that are at a risk either immunocompromised or high risk for comorbidity, and individuals who are not vaccinated are encouraged to wear masks, particularly in situations where they have close contact, and that close contact can't be avoided. In the lower, then there's really a non-need for anybody, and in the higher, there's a need for everyone. But in that middle range, again, individuals, and this is where it really becomes optional, and I think that the key is, in you folks have talked about this before, and we've talked about it, the decision to wear a mask has reached a point where it is a personal one, and people should not be attacked over that decision. It's an individual decision based upon your own willingness to accept risk, and again, you as a person do not know what issues other people have. They may have immunocompromised, they may deal with people either in personal or professional lives that are immunocompromised or at risk. So I think that we as a community need to continue to understand that there are those folks that will wear masks and respect that. And also, if you are someone who doesn't wear a mask, respect another individual's request to have a mask on. And I will say that despite that I personally believe that, and I feel strongly about that.
I know that you're in contact with Monadnock Community Hospital on a regular basis. I also had approached them, and they came to the same conclusion that we should make masks optional, with those caveats. Anyway.
All right, we didn't take any comment or questions from the audience. Does anybody have anything to add? Okay, so we had a motion, we had a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Great. Thanks for, at least we got a few months in there.
And hey, who knows, it might be back here in 6 months.
Today, might be a month.
Hopefully not.
Right. Curses with that.
All right.
Thank you.
Moving on. Our next item, the grant. Trust fund grant.
So this is essentially revoting, reauthorizing us to enter into a grant contract with the Drinking Water Groundwater Trust Fund through the New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services. We recently went back through, as you're going to hear again at some length tonight, construction costs have gone up for every project. And certainly Coldstone Springs is not immune from that. There was a significant increase to the construction costs. Jaffrey is working on getting an additional grant from US EDA that will support their share of the cost. And we were successful in getting an increased grant from the Drinking Water Groundwater Trust Fund, thanks in no small part to Rodney's very hard work on that. So what we're asking for now is for the select board to vote to enter into a drinking water and groundwater trust fund grant agreement with the New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services to fund a water system improvement project, and further to authorize town administrator Nicole McStay to execute any documents which may be necessary to effectuate this grant agreement.
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion? Because it's grant money, right? We're not gonna.
Yeah, this is grant money. This is not going to affect our tax rates or
Not at all.
anything else. So what it is increasing the amount of grant money we need in order to actually move forward on this project. Is that right?
Exactly. That is correct. It does not change our final appropriation. It's not tax dollars, nor is it water user fee dollars,
Right.
which is what is funding the balance of the project.
All right.
Way to go, Rodney, as usual.
Right. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 And Tyler, as you can see
Yeah.
from this, you're gonna have to come in and sign.
Certainly.
Set that
Yeah.
up tomorrow morning.
Nice. Just grab one of those markers for having
All right.
All right. Now, tell us about Soul Smart designation. Sounded interesting.
It is interesting. It's an interesting program. It's actually one that we had kind of looked at many, many years ago, but decided it really didn't provide a whole lot of benefit to the town, so, and was going to be a lot of work at that time, particularly for the planning and building department. Now, it makes a little bit more sense, since a lot of the work to streamline particularly the building permits process has already taken place. I asked Danica to take a look at the requirements of the program to get the Soul Smart designation, and she said actually it would be very few tweaks for us at this point. Really the only limitations, and this is me paraphrasing for Danica, but essentially the only limitations on building solar arrays is just meeting the building code requirements, making sure that you have completed your building permit application before you submit it. If you submit a complete application, it gets processed pretty quickly. And so long as you have, licensed electrician doing the install and the inspections are scheduled, there's really nothing to hold it up. So it's actually, to a certain extent, a little bit of low-hanging fruit for us to be able to get this designation. So we're certainly supportive of the application if the select board chooses to make it.
Now,
Yeah, Bill, you sent this letter. Would you like to add more?
it was on the recommendation of the Peterborough Renewable Energy Planning Team. I keep working on that acronym.
PrEP.
We call it the PrEP team. It was on their recommendation that we look at this program once again, and the PrEP team has offered their services to help move this process along as best we can. They're a good working group, so I have full confidence that this will go on. There's several members of the PrEP team in the audience. Brian Field was the one who actually kind of researched and then brought this forward to the town. Did you want to say a few words?
Yeah, I've got a few words. I promise not to take more than an hour.
So we have a half hour.
So I won't speak quickly because my wife says when I speak too quickly, no one understands me. So in May, as everyone knows, the town voted overwhelmingly to support the 100% renewable proposal. And the warrant article stated that the town would lead the community in initiatives designed to improve energy efficiency and to facilitate the transition of the town's institutions, businesses and residents to 100% renewable energy. So the PrEP committee was tasked by the select board to work on a plan. And we've been doing this since May, and we've put in about 400 hours just of meetings. That's not the work outside the meetings, which you estimate was another couple hundred hours.
Probably.
So there's a lot of work gone into this, and one of the things that came up was the Soul Smart program. And we got excited by it for a number of reasons. One, it's free, and the other thing is, you think of all the benefits. It'll create better opportunities for solar energy by cutting red tape, which makes it easier and more affordable for homes and businesses to install solar. It implements standard operating procedures for solar that are transparent, well-defined and documented and predictable. So it'll help us achieve local climate and energy goals. It'll reduce carbon emissions while improving local air quality and health outcomes. It'll improve financial returns for homeowners and local businesses, reduce local utility bills, and attract businesses that value local clean energy development. It'll also promote local well-paying jobs. I noticed that Philadelphia had done some calculations, and they figured for every 15 solar installations, one job was created in the solar industry. And if we can get local people to do the work, then we're going to create jobs here. It also lets solar companies know that Peterborough is a place to do business, so they'll want to come here and hopefully open businesses and so on. And the other thing is that young people are more concerned than us old people are about what's going on because they got to live with it. And the Soul Smart designation would show them that this is a town that cares about the environment and in which they would want to live. So it's a simple three-step process right now. I don't know what it was like when Danica, when the town looked at it way back, but the first thing you do is complete a solar statement that demonstrates the local government's commitment to pursue Solar Smart designation. That's that letter, it's already done. All it needs is you guys' autographs on it, and that's step one. Step two, with assistance from the Solar Staff Smart, so this is a good tongue twister, say it 3 times fast. Solar Smart staff, the town completes the Solar Smart scorecard, which establishes a solar baseline. And then the town works with Solar Smart staff to complete what they call credits and achieve designation. And if Danica's already looked at this, she knows that we can probably get the bronze designation right now, if not the silver, just on what we've got. So the amount of time we'll have to put into it is probably pretty minimal. Keene and Lebanon have bronze designations. Be nice if we could get the silver. Solar Smart technical assistance providers work with elected officials, local government staff, community members to help local governments update processes using established best practices. The whole thing is funded by the Department of Energy. What local governments have to do is commit staff time to working with Solar Smart. And what I had got from the guy who's doing it was 2 to 10 hours, and when I looked online, they said 5 to 10 hours. So somewhere between 2 and 10 hours is about what they think commitment will be for town staff. The time will be needed for consulting with Solar Smart staff, editing and finalizing documents, updating local government web pages, and to schedule and attend trainings. The various kinds of trainings are delivered through an online resource library, email, webinars, templates, virtual meetings, conference calls, and site visits. The objective is to increase transparency, to post a permitting checklist online, post a solar landing page so anyone in Peterborough who wants to do solar can just look up solar Peterborough and they'll be there, and increase understanding. It would provide free training to the permitting and inspection staff on solar PV best practices. Everyone knows what PV is, photovoltaic. And provide training to planning and zoning staff on the latest solar land use practices. The idea is to reduce barriers to solar installation. And it would codify photovoltaics as a by right allowed accessory use. The bronze certification again takes 2 to 6 months and about 5 to 10 hours of staff time. It'll take 2 months if we want to hurry and spend the 10 hours in 2 months. It'll take 6 months if we want to take our time about it. And if we like the program, we just keep going until we get gold. Thank you.
Thanks, Brian.
Thank you, Brian. Anybody else have any questions or additions?
I want to point out that at the Soul Smart site, there is a map. And on that map, there's Keene and there's Lebanon. And we want to be on that map, but I agree with you. Silver would be great.
Carol.
Carol Nelson, just wondering how long does that designation last? Does it need to be re-upped after?
No, it's like a forever thing, but what you can do, as I say, is increase to silver and gold, which the idea is to get the whole process down to less than 3 days.
Thank you.
Loretta.
Loretta Laurinaitis. I'm just wondering what it means to the homeowner. I mean, does that mean that we get reduced solar if we go through this program? What does it mean?
If we go through the program, what they call the soft costs, the costs associated with permitting and everything else would go down.
I'm sorry.
What they call the soft costs, so you've got the hard costs, which are the construction and all that, but the cost of doing the permitting would go down.
I have a question, if that's all right.
Yeah.
Who is Soul Smart?
Soul Smart is a collection of agencies who do the work and they're funded by the Department of Energy. So it's a government program, but there are 2 organizations. One is the International Network of Cities or something like that. I can't remember what the other one is, but it's just 2 organizations who've kind of been doing this work for a while, and they're funded by the Department of Energy, so it's freebie for us.
So it's work that's funded that we're already technically paying for, but not taking advantage of yet.
Yes,
You could think of it like that, yeah?
yes,
Definitely.
that's exactly it.
Good question. Anybody else? All right, I would make a motion that we engage in this program as a town, Peterborough.
I'll second it. Sure.
Any further discussions or questions?
Would you like to move to appoint Bill Kennedy to sign on behalf of the select board, or do you want all three to?
I thought that was implied.
Okay.
He's the only one that wrote his name in the book. You notice he didn't add ours.
Be happy to.
Yeah.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Yeah, good one. We're getting closer to the sun. What else is on our agenda? I know at 6 o'clock we have a public hearing, and then at 6:30 we have another public hearing that hopefully everyone will join us for. And those are, the first one at 6:30 is for our
Budget.
proposed fiscal year budget for '23, and then at 6:30 we have the municipal campus and fire and ambulance facility proposal. What can we do in the meantime?
Take a recess.
Recess, yay!
Everybody outside to the swings.
Did you approve your?
Anybody have any? Yes.
I have a
Lori.
question. For the municipal complex, public hearing, what specifically will that be about?
Nicole?
That's going to be providing an overview of of what will be covered by that bond article, the proposed bond article.
Okay,
So it's going to speak generally about the facility, it's going to speak generally about the campus, and some of the preliminary cost estimates that we're looking at right now.
great, thank you.
Anybody else? Yeah, we're right.
Are there any handouts for that public hearing that we could review while you're in recess?
No, so the budget's all online, so you can certainly go onto the website to grab that. And we do have a couple of copies printed out for people who have not been able to get it from the website for whatever reason. We were actually making edits to the presentation pretty much right up until about an hour or so before the meeting, so we weren't quite ready to put that stuff out there. But of course, after this meeting, we will have the drafts out for public.
Well, I was wondering about design pictures of the facility.
Yep.
Is there anything
No.
to offer us now? Because
No.
I read in the minutes that there were like 3 options that the task force looked at, and there was one that they favored. So
Yes.
I wondered if that's something that's going to be shared with us.
No, it's not, because what we really have to present at this point is still just a conceptual. We don't have those designs yet. We're still very much in the early stages of moving from a conceptual to an actual design.
But everything that is in this presentation will be available on the website in a day or
Yes.
so.
Yes, tomorrow.
Lori?
Wondering if there is a component of either this presentation tonight or in the future that will talk anything about any kind of renewable or renewable components.
Yes.
Yes?
We're going to talk about it incredibly briefly tonight,
Okay,
because again, we're just in the beginning stages of moving from conceptual to actual, so.
got it.
There's no detail. There is no detail really, other than to say that we are looking at it. There's a couple of options in particular that we've started to look at, but there's nothing concrete.
Okay,
And I will also add that at the final meeting with the task force, there were presentations made on mechanical systems, and one of them was I think it was gas powered or non-renewables. And so it was made pretty clear by the task force and the general consensus that the town would favor a more environmentally sustainable option with
wonderful.
renewables. So that kind of passed pretty well at that meeting. So
Thank you.
I think that it's going to cost more upfront,
But not,
but
that you'll
we
save
know
later.
how that, we know how we're getting paid back for those in the future.
Thank you.
Any other great questions? All right. Well, there's no muffin stand or coffee anywhere. All right. We'll take a small recess and we'll come back at 6 o'clock.
Yes.
I should have brought a book.
Brian. Love hearing about that.
Thanks, Bob. Brian, thank you very much. I already read it, actually. I stopped by Steele's and picked up a copy on my way. Thanks, though.
You can sell it back. Awesome.
All right. Well, that has been on my list of concerns, is cutting your rent.
Yes, I'm sure. It's been on my list. I don't know if it's been on, I mean, you have to add it to your list.
I was hoping to cut back on mine.
It'll all work out.
We actually talked to a company about,
We did the one down by Carolyn's house.
that was Greg Blake, sold out back. We did talk to a company about doing a large scale solar array, and they needed a minimum of 80 acres of open space.
Now, can it
Which
be?
is almost 100% of our open space.
Yeah, but I know that, or I should say I know, my understanding was the Morrisons also looked at something across the top of the area by the power line.
That was for Andy's house?
I think it was for Andy's house, the barn, and his rental.
Yeah.
But if you can connect those two, if that's 20 acres or something.
Well, we started talking about it because Sandy Hennigan was looking at doing a big one up
Right, it's the
there.
other side, yeah. And those properties aren't close together.
Right. And both right next to the power line.
Well, and that's the other thing too, is you've got easy access to the power.
I'm on the dead.
Yeah, exactly.
Needs to be a little better return than us having zero remaining open space.
Exactly.
Hey Danica, how's it going?
Good, how are you doing?
I'm good. Chief?
How are you?
Good.
Hey, how you doing down?
What?
Oh, right, budget.
Here, right?
Been tighten up the ship. Right.
What's that?
I always see her like that. It cracks me up. At least it's on her mind.
Here you go, Chief. He called me like right when we walked in the building. Oh, okay. He must have saw me when he saw the cameras again. I have to disconnect him. I just think him.
Were you, sir?
With their shirt. Oh, yeah. I told him I only do it, but I tell him when I do it. If that's not cool.
You go online and get your permits for the whole year.
I do it to see if he's there.
We're crowded up in this time.
Call that stalking. Yes, there's criminal charges involved, yeah, whatever.
It's more like a little like solo show or just a little.
Stalking, working.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, that'll work. Yeah, perfect. Yeah.
Honestly, oh, is that the thing?
Oh, okay. Just keeping that like right by the door so we can make us quick exit.
I know, I like being in the back row for once.
The way she scheduled it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good excuse, I like that.
I'm sitting next to you because you got a gun, so, you know. Oh, Mike's watching right now. Yes.
Found you. Get my various classes organized.
Yeah, I can take that away from the chief, you know that. Can you? Oh, yeah.
Use it for driving.
Yeah.
Well, the fire.
That's Kel Wilson's stuff.
Okay. I'll figure out this one.
Hello.
Hello.
Thank you for your responses earlier.
Got room for more chairs in the front.
Oh, yeah, oh, 3 months, oh,
I'm always surprised to hear the accusations you didn't think of. How do you know that? Maybe we definitely, but you don't know.
How are you?
You tried that about.
Yes.
What's that?
I mean, I think we can set it. Yeah, this is gonna,
I just wanted to thank you for supporting this last month.
oh yeah, I mean, once we look into it,
I also need to think
yeah, I mean, I really hope that someday there's, maybe some grant funding that might come.
Yes. We have a
I'll be right.
Yes, there's actually a lot of so sometime soon we
Yeah, at some point, yeah.
So you're gonna stick that with the fireworks in?
midnight time.
Oh, yeah. I would think so, yeah. Yeah, because we've got
Yeah,
to
something like that.
vote them on different. Oh, that's right. Thumbs up or thumbs down. And I don't know where you stand. With what I'm working on. You're gonna run well. I've got
Anything else going on now?
Oh, I don't know. That's a good
Did
question.
you get the latest?
You don't think there's areas when he brings his own house along?
We certainly don't know. 3 people.
Not even plugged in.
There's 3 people coming up. There's IT. This is my 3rd year coming up, so it's not me. That's the only one I
That
know.
is shared with me, the select board.
Do you know where you
It's not
stand
with
on
the
that?
budget committee.
I came.
Maybe you did. Maybe you did. Look at your email.
So this is your notes. Rolling down again and Bob Hanson did it again. Yeah. I was dealing with it. All right, so you're, yeah, we got a bunch of meetings. So you got two years to go still.
The latest figure I heard was
The first one.
I'll text my boss.
that's gonna be
Exchange notes.
Okay, when do I show up? Somebody heard that.
Squeeze me in. How you doing, Laura? I'm doing good. How are you?
Good morning, yeah, this morning, all right.
get a design after competitive.
What's your?
The cost. Furthermore, this,
Honestly, if we knew where they are,
is this just the fire station?
gotta make them quit. I don't know what other five.
I think you're gonna get those.
It's not something you want to with.
I just found
Oh, so I had it on her calendar because originally I wanted to take her out to the game.
Mention that.
In charge of it?
Well, actually, so the notice that was sent said, the agenda we put to your policy, and I sent that to the register, amending it to see if it was. It is technically just started, but as long as it doesn't earlier.
Hey, Bob.
The second officer is like, okay, now this is gonna go. Keeps the knife in the woods and lays down on the ground. It's like, oh, it's before having to. Yeah, that was the guy the night. But as soon as the second officer got there, because he knew George was doing anything by himself. As soon as the second officer got there, the knife goes in the wood, he's face down on the ground.
That's where it gets tricky.
You need something to establish
Construction costs.
The battle is only going to capture basically. That plan
So this notion of construction costs.
Particularly since we focus on government, because I only get one shot a year.
So you recognize this number's in line. But we also know that it's hard to compare because these things. So she gave us these numbers before. To put that in,
You know, whether or not
this year, last year, but it's definitely confusing because this is not the show. So I said, what do we just subtract this out? So that's what this table is. The answer is last year, look at that.
Well, that's what's fun.
Yeah, indeed. But even if you look at this, it includes these.
we've done some.
Did you have meetings outside these joint meetings?
If you look at this number, this includes one.
It means you are going to move in that direction. Pursuant. That's a legal jargon.
Which is this number. So this is when you take out one on zero.
I'm saying, like, you can barely see that.
I don't know if we're still on the air. Typically they would, the sign would be on the air. You know I'm doing this under duress. I'm not sure.
Did they vote to extend?
No.
Where tomorrow, but we have to.
Is Bob Lambert here?
Yeah.
Okay.
Right, sure.
Jimmy Long is
Okay, everybody else is here. He's right here.
All the cookies are gone.
Donnie's here.
Everybody else is here.
Andy's here.
I think everybody's here, but we have to open the session at 6. And I believe the first thing we're going to do, Carl, is to approve the minutes.
Was that done in the other meeting?
That's right. There were minutes, but
But you haven't seen it.
she sent them to us, but she forgot the attachment. And that was just today. I sent her a note back, but then I went to another meeting, so I haven't seen it.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, we can put it off.
Well,
But
I
we're not
can
going to have another
abstain.
joint session.
Indeed. That's just where we are. At the moment, my position is I abstain because I didn't see them. What else can I say? What I'll do is, I'll read them eventually, and I'll go back, and if I see typos, I'll check. Or I could do substitution.
He's done a pretty good job.
If the people who have read them are happy, I'm happy.
No, you told me you already figured out the code to the door.
I'm glad they were here.
I don't know, every time we did.
He did pass making masks optional. Although that doesn't take effect.
Keep mine on.
We had members of the audience who were not at the meeting.
Did you say you've changed that?
As of midnight tonight, it's going to be optional. Yeah, in public.
Not at the moment.
No.
Okay. Not that I would take mine off. With everybody else having it on, you know. I figured that was coming soon.
That New England copy that's
Well, it's probably MUR, CNN.
That's on sale. No, I think that's store too, so I stopped. Nicole's
Good evening, everyone. Thanks for coming out. Tonight is March 1st, and we're going to enter into our public hearing on our budget for the fiscal year 2023. I'm Tyler Ward. Up at the table are a combination of budget committee members and select board members, and I'll introduce them. Don Parkhurst, budget committee, Rich Clark, budget committee, Jim Long, budget committee, Carl Mabzino is the chair of the budget committee, Ron McIntyre, budget committee, Bill Kennedy is a select board member, Al Lennis, budget committee, Rick Lester is on the budget committee, Andy Sliver is on the budget committee, we have Bob Lambert in the audience over here on the budget committee, and then every one of you works for the town or as a department head or, except for, I see a couple people. Oh, and Bill. He's possibly up for re-election. And of course, Alan Briggs is here taking our minutes again. We have Nicole McStay, our town administrator, at the front table, along with Chief Walker and Chief Kennard. So, Nicole, ready to go?
Yes, I am. Ready to open the public hearing on the proposed fiscal year 23 budget?
Correct.
Okay. So first, I'm going to just review the agenda for tonight's meeting. We'll hold the public hearing for the proposed fiscal year budget, 2023 budget. After that, we'll hold a public hearing for the proposed fire and ambulance facility and municipal campus bond. And then lastly, we'll review and vote to recommend proposed warrant articles. These are warrant articles particularly with money attached to them, because those require a vote to recommend or not recommend from both the select board and the budget committee.
Nicole, there was some unfinished business left over from previous meetings. I'm not here.
Find him.
There was a budget approval,
Yes,
I'm sorry.
set of minutes, that's right.
Minutes approval.
Yeah, the budget committee and select board had, before we start the budget hearing, have minutes from the February 1st meeting, yep, to approve.
Motion to approve those as written, as corrected.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thanks, Al.
Okay, thank you, sorry, I almost forgot.
Thanks for the reminder. Yeah.
Sorry about that. This is the last time we're going to get together, right?
I believe so, yes. Yeah. As long as we can get through everything, yeah. There is a lot. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'll make the presentations on the budget and the bond. At that point, the select board will, and the budget committee will have the opportunity to ask questions, and then following that, the public will have the opportunity to ask questions and make comments. It's the process that we followed before, so I'd like to just get through this, particularly this presentation relatively quickly, which I think we should be able to do. When we're looking at the draft budget this year, as the budget committee and select board recall, we made a number of changes to how the budget is being presented. Budgets are now being organized under the department director who is presenting them. The salaries, COLA, and merit have been moved to each employee's primary department unless they're split across multiple funds. Those funds, for instance, being the general fund, which most of the departments fall under, or the enterprise fund, or the ambulance fund. Revolving and special revenue funds, which are supported by user fees, that includes recreation and ambulance, will be present or have been presented with the entire budget, but they are no longer going to be included in Article 3. They do not require town meeting approval. Those are under the purview of the select board. Enterprise fund, which is water and sewer, will still be part of Article 3. The capital reserve and expendable trust funds will no longer be included as offsetting revenue or as budgeted expenditures. Once they've been acted on by town meeting, that's it. The selectmen simply make those requests for reimbursement when those purchases have been made. There have been a number of items, as usual, that have budget-wide impacts. Health insurance, we are expecting to go up 2.8% next year. We're in the off year for the New Hampshire retirement system. There's no expected increases for fiscal year '23. When we started this whole process back in October, the Northeast Consumer Price Index was at 5.4%. At this point, that almost feels like halcyon days, as we're looking at well over 7%. Merit and COLA generally follow the Northeast Consumer Price Index. We were not quite comfortable with going as high as 5.4 at the time, and so we have budgeted for a combined 4.6% merit and COLA, which is included in all of those budgets. We are no longer budgeting for veterans credits, blind, and elderly exemptions. You'll see that as I discuss the finance department. And electricity costs are expected to go up dramatically, but we really have no idea what that means. So we've estimated a budgeted increase of 30% in all departments. All right, so this is where we'll go through each department. And I want to say just first off that I really appreciate all the work that department directors did. They brought in some incredibly responsible, carefully thought out budgets that required very little changes as we went through this process. So really my appreciation goes to all of them for the work that they did. Significant highlights of each of these budgets are, in administration, the assessing database is $50,000. We're looking to upgrade this. We've had this database for about 10 years now. It's more or less on its last legs and is really not providing, we're not getting the support that we need from the company that offers it, so we're looking to make a change. We'll do that, we'll budget for it this year, and then we'll look to implement it. We'll run 2 systems concurrently for about a year or so before we switch over to the new system. In planning and building, we have a MASS grant for $30,000 for visioning and engineering in the downtown. That's specifically targeted at pedestrian infrastructure improvements and bike improvements. The town clerk has 3 elections coming up in fiscal year '23, which accounts for pretty much all of the increase in that budget. IT and GIS was particularly affected by that change where we moved all staff from being spread out across multiple departments into just having the salary and home department. That made up about half of the increase. The other half of the increase is due to software licensing and security licensing to the tune of more or less $75,000. In the finance department, we've removed those credits and exemptions from the budget, which reduced it by $216,000. We also refinanced bonds, which include the early payoff of the West Peterborough TIF bond, and all debt service is loaded into the finance department if it's coming out of the general fund. In recreation, salaries are now being properly distributed between the general fund and the recreation revolving fund, which has eliminated that transfer from the general fund to the revolving fund that you saw every year. In library, there's an awful lot of unknowns in terms of the operation costs of this building, and so fiscal year '23 is going to be our benchmark year. The police department, we eliminated the licensing cost of software that's no longer needed to capture cell phone data. The police department was also able to complete the upgrade of the in-house video system, and unfortunately, as with many things, vehicle parts are up, which accounts for some of that increase, but special details are down, as is their offsetting revenue. And fire and emergency management, the $50,000 transfer that we typically budget in the fire department budget was removed from the budget. That's a separate warrant article that we'll address in a little bit. And in public works, downtown tree maintenance program is being supported by the downtown TIF. That's a program that seeks to improve the health and longevity of the many trees that we have in the downtown parks. We have contracted services for mowing of the downtown parks now, and so there was a little bit of there's an offset in the cost for salaries that went towards, that helped to go towards that contracted services. In West Peterborough TIF, highway maintenance is up, but so too is the offsetting revenue from the West Peterborough TIF District Fund. And recycling, we're looking to purchase a $28,000 glass crusher. And that is being offset by the Reclamation Trust funds. Those are the fees that are, some of the fees that are tacked onto your automobile registrations. Post-closure landfill monitoring costs, that's the EMS, landfill, and the Scott Mitchell landfill. Those costs vary from year to year, and so you see increases and decreases to match that. And also there's a $100,000 request for the South Peterborough TIF District Engineering that is being 100% offset by the TIF District's funds. In water and sewer, the water salary line is increased due to Rodney Bartlett's work for the Coldstone Springs project, which has paid itself in dividends over and over and over again. And in total, our gross expenditure, which is the amount that you will see on the town meeting warrant, is $13,666,781. Now, if you want to compare apples to apples, in prior years, the budget we voted on at town meeting also included the revolving funds, the special revenue funds, and so you have to add those all together if you want to compare them to a prior year's warrant. So if you were to do that, last year, we've asked for $15,817,741 as a gross appropriation. This year, we would be, if we were to add all these things together, we would be asking for $16,092,749, which is a 1.74% increase over the prior year. And that's it. That is my presentation on the budget. Any questions from the Select Board or Budget Committee?
Anyone? Members of the Budget Committee? No?
And that's not because just in case anybody is wondering if it seems like we're not paying attention or whatever. We've been dealing with this since, November, December, so we've already had, seems like hundreds of meetings about it. But not that we just don't have any questions, it's that we've been through every cent already.
Yeah, and I'll reiterate what Nicole said about the department heads and their right on the money budget's very, very impressive. Anybody in the audience have any questions or comments?
I actually have a couple questions, just real quick. The total expenditures, you said, are going up by 1.74%.
If you were to compare, yes.
If you were to compare the two.
Yep.
I did a little bit of research, and I've noticed that towns around us, Jaffrey, Dublin, Rindge, are all looking at increases of 5.7%. Dublin, 11.5%, although that isn't finalized yet. Rindge, 7.1%. So this is pretty amazing. If we're comparing apples to apples, are we comparing apples to apples, do you know?
I think so. I mean, I've been very focused on getting ready for this presentation tonight, so I haven't really dug into the neighboring communities and their budget proposals, but yes, on the face of it, I believe that, our department directors, again, have been very careful and very conservative in bringing forward their proposed budgets this year, and I think we should all be very proud of that work.
That's why I wanted to highlight it. They did a really excellent job.
I'd like to just add to that point, because Tyler also said something about what a fine job the department heads have done. The accounting system this year that's tracked all of this for us has really greatly facilitated the discussions, and the numbers that we're seeing tonight are the numbers we've been seeing for some time, which is not the usual case in this process. So things have worked very well this year.
I think you can thank.
Well, I don't know what can be done, but you got about 20 people out in the hallway.
Well, have they heard any of this?
I don't know.
It doesn't seem like the microphones are doing anything.
No.
The microphones are just for the broadcast and for the streaming. There's no speakers in the building.
Okay. So then, yeah. I don't think.
Does anybody out there have any questions or would like to make a comment?
Not at this time.
Not at this time. Anybody else in the room?
There's some more seats open in here. If anyone wants to come in, take a little burden off the hallway.
I'll be leaving to take my seat.
You're not gonna need your jackets on.
All right, so Nicole, would you prefer to have a vote recommending?
Not yet,
Not
so
yet.
we'll do that at the end, so that'll be after we've completed the budget hearing and the bond hearing. We're all set to move on.
I have a quick question, sorry.
Sure.
What percentage, or what part of this budget is going to be covered by taxes?
So that's that's very difficult for us to estimate right now. It's almost impossible to estimate revenues. If you look back through your budget worksheets, we do have a revenue section, and so we did some estimates there. Lily, do you have that right in front of you?
Estimates of revenue total for the general fund
For the general fund.
is $3,813,116, whereas water and sewer are fully covered with fees. So the total amount to be raised in taxes would be 7.4 million divided by 11.1 million. Anybody got a calculator?
But again, those are very rough estimates. We won't actually know what our revenues received are going to be until we get closer to September.
Right. Revenues are recalculated and submitted to the Department of Revenue due September 1st every year before tax rate is calculated. So that revenue figure is a preliminary number that will be considered and readjusted for September 1st.
Excuse me, I didn't quite understand what you said there because you were calling for some kind of calculation. I thought you just gave the number. That is, if you subtract out from the 13,666 that we have here, the water and sewer, you get the number you gave of 11,183,000 and so on. And the estimate on revenue is 3.8 million. That leaves you with the amount that taxes have to contribute is 7.4 million.
Yes,
7 point-
yes, correct.
Yeah,
Yep.
all right. So we don't need a calculation to figure out what proportion of that, or what the dollar value is. Yeah, okay.
Yes.
Even though that's an estimate,
Sorry,
how does that?
can you just state your name for
Oh,
the
sorry,
minutes?
I apologize. My name is Shane Sigmund.
Thanks.
Even though that's an estimate and we won't know till later in the year, projected wise, how does that compare to previous years? Like year over year, I guess.
Don't have that right in front of me. I do have that number, but I don't have it right in front of me, unfortunately. But it's not far off. We raised about 7.3 million this year in taxes.
Yes.
And I'm trying to remember the exact number, but
I'll get the annual report up.
yeah, but it was about 7.3 million in taxes, so our estimates are pretty much the same.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Anyone else have a question?
Any other questions out there? No, sir.
Thank you. Anyone else in here have anything to add, or? Okay, I think it's time to move forward.
Okay.
So we'll close the public hearing for our budget for the fiscal year 2023 with those great questions and answers and nice numbers.
So I'm inserting a little bit of an interlude here since we are talking a little bit about other funds, including the ambulance revolving fund. I want to talk a bit about that article since this is a good time to do that. The ambulance service revolving fund is a revolving fund that supports two services. The 911 emergency service, which is exactly what it sounds like. That's when you call 911, they're the folks that respond to you. They make up 55% on average of the expenditures of the fund and 45% of the revenues of the fund. And then there's the interfacility patient transfer service. That's the service that we operate that moves patients from typically Monadnock Community Hospital out to other facilities, whether it's Dartmouth-Hitchcock or UMass or Catholic Medical Center, wherever that patient needs to go to receive the treatment that they need. We started providing that service, as most of you know, back in 2014 when St. Joseph's was no longer providing that service to Monadnock Community Hospital. And it's been very successful. While it makes up 45% of the expenditures, it brings in 55% of the revenues. Thank you. Sorry, it was 8 million. It was $8,021,266 was how much we made for the town share of taxes this year. So if revenues hold to the estimates that we had, we'll actually be asking a little bit less in general taxation. But that, again, is before we talk about the other special warrant articles and everything else that we still have. That is just if we look at the operating. Okay? So, all right, so back to the ambulance service. The 911 emergency service also includes the regional towns that we provide the service to. Those towns are billed for their share of the shortfall, which is the difference between the cost of providing the 911 service and the fees that we actually take in. Peterborough's share of the cost to run 911 service has been primarily supported by the profits from the transfer service, with a $50,000 taxpayer contribution each year. This year, we will be asking voters to fully support the cost of Peterborough's share of the 911 service with tax dollars. And the cost, that share this year, just so we have that number right in front of us, is $328,738. Now, we'll get a little bit more into how the 911 service charges are calculated. So we have that shortfall calculation in the top left corner for fiscal year 22, this current fiscal year, not our proposed. And that the budget expenditures are $994,640 for just the 911 side of the ambulance service, does not include the transfer service. The anticipated fees that we believe that we will get for that, providing the service, are $513,541, leaving us with a shortfall of $481,098. And then on the top right there, you see a little box for the capital improvement plan. What we do is we take a 6-year look at our capital improvements plan for the ambulance service, and then combine that and divide it by 6, and that gives us the 2021 share of that capital improvement plan. Because you have to remember, the fiscal year begins in 2021. It will end in 2022, June 30th, 2022. And then we get into our blended formula. So you see each of the towns with their population. Half of the formula is based on population. And then in that middle column there, you have the 911 calls, which makes up the other half of the blended formula. So for each of these towns, we take their population, figure out what percentage they are of the total, and same with the 911 calls, the percentage that they are of the total, and then we combine that together to get that fully loaded, what is your share. Peterborough's share often is right around this 55-56%. Now we're getting closer to 57% of the total combined. Following that, Dublin, Hancock, Temple, Francistown, and Sharon. And then at the bottom, we have our computation for cost of service. So we take that blended computation, we divvy up the shortfall along with the share of the capital plan. And then we have, on top of that, for the other communities, we also charge an administrative fee and an assumption of risk fee, bringing the total due for each community to that bottom right-hand section. So the total due from each of the communities, other than Peterborough, and then Peterborough itself, which again is about a little bit more than half of the total. I know it's a lot of numbers. I'm going to throw a ton of numbers at you during this conversation. I'm sorry. All right, so if we look over the years at 911 ambulance shared services, this runs from fiscal year 2016 to 2022. I tried to actually go back to 2014, but unfortunately, I just couldn't fit it all onto the slide, so I had to chop it off somewhere. But you can see that our revenues, our expenditures, have been increasing over the years. Our revenues have been up and down, but really mostly pretty flat. And that shortfall has steadily increased. Peterborough's share of that shortfall, as I said, has been typically right around 55-56%, but it's gone up and down for various reasons. And Peterborough's cost of service has steadily increased, as has the cost of service for all those other towns when you add them all together. And another way to look at that is just graphically. It's the exact same thing, just put into lines. So the orange is the 911 expenditures. The gray with the triangles is the revenue. The shortfall is that yellow line. The green line is Peterborough's cost of service, and the blue line is all other towns' cost of service over time. And as you can see, generally speaking, expenditures have gone up the shortfall has gone up, and revenues have been slowly but steadily declining. And it's actually a bit more dramatic if you look even further back in time, before before we got, before the healthcare plan passed, we were actually receiving a bit more in revenue, particularly from inter-facility transfers than we are now in 911 service. A lot of those costs were either cut or capped, and they haven't really changed very much over the years to keep up with the increased expenses related to providing an ambulance service. All right, and this is the worst one, I'm sorry. So this shows the ambulance fund year over year from fiscal year 16 to fiscal year 2021. This is straight out of the town's audit reports. I've done a little bit just to break out the revenue that you see in those top rows. So you can see the contributions that we are getting from charges for service, those fees that we collect at the very top row. And then below that, the charges for service that we're getting from other towns, and then Peterborough, and Peterborough's contribution. I have FY19 asterisk because that was when we changed the fund type from a special revenue fund to a revolving fund, which is why you see those really strange swings in the revenues and the expenditures in that 1 year. So that's it looks like an outlier because it really is an outlier. It's the way that the accounting happened behind the scenes, and I'm not even going to begin to try to explain it because I really barely understand it myself. But at any rate, when you get through it, you can see once again that the revenues have been slowly but steadily declining for the most part. And so that means that when you get to the bottom line there, the bottom row, our ending fund balance has been in pretty rough shape. And that brought us to when we got into fiscal year 20 and 21, and we were experiencing COVID. We unfortunately had a massive increase in our expenditures and a serious reduction in our expenses, all of which completely emptied out and then some our fund balance, leaving us with really no option but to ask the voters at this past year's town meeting to move $400,000 of fund balance from the general fund to the ambulance revolving fund, essentially to keep this service, the doors open on the service, and allow us to pay our bills. And that's exactly what happened. And again, graphically, when I look at that last chart in pictures, you can see that our actual ambulance revolving fund from 16 to 21, slowly but surely the revenues have either been static or slowly declining, our expenditures jumped, and our ending fund balance plummeted. And if it hadn't been for the taxpayers coming in and providing that much needed assistance, we really wouldn't be here right now talking about the ambulance service. We would have had to close the doors. So what is that? Why are we having this conversation? It's really so we can avoid having this happen again. We did know that we were running into a situation with the fund balance where it was slowly but surely declining, and that we knew that we were going to need to make some changes, in 2019. We knew that we were going to need to make some changes to slowly increase the amount that the town of Peterborough's taxpayers were contributing towards the support of the ambulance service as a whole. But before we could really start to have that conversation publicly, the crisis happened. And it didn't become a thing that we knew we needed to work towards. It became an emergency that we absolutely had to respond to, which is exactly what we did. We really want to avoid being in this place ever again. We simply cannot operate the ambulance service the way that we have been, relying on the profits of the transfer program to support Peterborough's share of the 911 service. In order to continue to maintain the excellent level of support that we have here, we really need to ask our taxpayers to fully fund their share of the cost of the 911 ambulance service, which again is $328,738 this year. So how does that compare? Let me show you. This is a little bit, so please, I want to say right up front, this slide is looking at the 2020 20 and 21 per capita cost of ambulance service in other communities, including Peterborough. That's because this, and I want to thank Matt for doing this, he went and looked through other towns' annual reports and did the math and provided it, Matt Robley. Those annual reports, they don't have their 21 annual reports out yet. They have their 2020 annual reports. So we did our best to provide a pretty apples-to-apples comparison. So with our population of 6,716 people in fiscal year 21, which is 2020 to 2021, your per capita cost, if the town of Peterborough had fully paid it, would have been $49.61 per person. And you can see that it's certainly not the highest, and it's certainly not the lowest in our service area. If you look at other towns of comparable sizes, you can also see that, again, that per capita cost is not the highest and not the lowest. Newport and Sandown are two very extreme outliers, and I'm sure there's a story behind those, but I didn't exclude them. I left them in the chart just so you can see that there is an enormous range of cost for service across the state. All right, and so in fiscal year 23, should this warrant article pass, the cost for service for each person per capita in Peterborough would be $48.33. So you can kind of see where that would fall into this. And that's what I have for presentation on the ambulance service. Are there any questions?
Nicole, how do you anticipate these numbers changing up or down or staying the same going forward next couple of years? Is this what we'll be looking at now going forward, or will there be other factors involved that will change that dramatically?
Well, the cost of service,
I'm just asking
will
the bottom
will it
line
be
as far as the revolving fund that will get the taxpayers.
so the bottom line is that the revolving fund will be able to recover. So if you're talking about the fund balance, I assume that's what you mean. If I can go back to this chart, so you just want to see. By continuing this contribution, by having the taxpayers pay that cost of service that's in line with the what we bill out to the other communities, that will allow the transfer service side of the business to rebuild the fund balance. So the 911 service will be paying for itself with that assistance, and the profits from the transfer service will go to rebuilding that fund balance and making it more able to fully support the ambulance service and its needs going forward. So if there is another, I really hope we don't have another pandemic like this, but any kind of an emergency, we'd be able to draw on that. We would also be able to use it as we had always hoped to, which is to fully offset the cost of purchasing some of the vehicles that we use. So if you look in here, and right in the middle line of this, the capital outlay, that's the purchase of vehicles and the equipment that we use to equip those vehicles, those ambulances. One of those we actually purchased 100% using fund balance of the ambulance and the ambulance service. And unfortunately, that put us into a really precarious position, unwittingly, when the pandemic struck. We didn't have enough fund balance to cover the impacts.
I guess what I'm asking though, a year from now, will we be looking at a similar number when we're looking at the ambulance revolving fund?
Likely, yes. Yes, absolutely, yes, I'm sorry. Yep. So the cost of service is still going to be based on that formula. It's still going to be that delta between what we receive and what we need to spend. And I don't expect that to change significantly. It will naturally, as everything does, increase over time as expenses increase over time.
Should we be, should we be building up the fund with additional monies? Is that recommended at all?
I think that by doing this, we will be doing enough to protect ourselves and to be building up the fund in a responsible way. I say that hesitatingly because you just never know. I can't guarantee that there won't be another significant impact of some kind to the fund that I can't foresee right now. But
A quick follow-up question on that one. You mentioned obviously the pandemic or COVID. Do you have a sense of how much that may have impacted the whole service, and whether there's any government or state funds would have been or are available?
So there were some funds, and we did take advantage of those. There was CARES Act money that came down that helped to offset some of the cost of the increased cost of our salaries. And that actually ran through the general fund. I believe we ran that through the emergency management department. So that's where you'll see that when you look at our past year. There is also the money that we've just recently, the selectmen accepted back in August that is also on the warrant, the ARPA money. That money, however, can't go towards fund balance. It can go towards, there's a number of things it can go towards. We're looking particularly to earmark that for the municipal campus fire and ambulance facility project, which it can go towards. So even though, yes, it's $700,000 that we are receiving because of revenues that were lost, we can't actually use it to replenish fund balance. It's explicitly disallowed by U.S. Treasury.
So, hand in the back, yeah.
Hi, Leslie Lewis. So in regard to the transfer service, I recall when it was formed, there was sort of a business plan put together based on fees, based on expenses. But now I'm hearing that the fees have changed considerably. And we're talking about rebuilding the fund balance. Has anyone put together a new business plan to look at the current landscape of competition and current fees to really see what the impact on the fund balance is going to be?
Sure. So the challenge really is that there isn't competition. This is becoming one of those situations where you're seeing private businesses pulling out of ambulance service because there is no more profit to be made in it. The transfer service is actually doing incredibly well still. They are still not only supporting themselves, but helping, right now, they continue to be helping the Peterborough taxpayer reduce the amount that they need to contribute towards running the 911 service. It's a 911 service that we're really talking about here. And that's where there's been that reduction or stagnation of revenue. And that's really where we're struggling. The transfer program is actually doing very well. We typically don't have a whole lot of trouble, so long as it's a medically necessary transfer, of course. We don't have a lot of trouble receiving insurance payout for that. Medicaid and Medicare still pay at a pretty good rate for those transfers when they're medically necessary. It's really the 911 where we have the problem. I forget exactly what the cap is on the Medicaid and Medicare.
So you don't really see a need to really reevaluate that program at all?
No, I think where we can evaluate, for example, this year we looked to increase our ambulance rates. One of the reasons was CMS, which is the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services, provided an inflation increase of about 5.2%.
Yeah.
If my memory is 5.2%. So we looked to increase our rates 5.2% to try to capture that as that went up. One of the things we have looked at is unfortunately the reimbursements are controlled through a lot of those insurance things. When Laura Jengers is here from Manhattan Community Hospital, one of the things we've done in the last few months is look at controlling the expense side of that. We were fortunate and we were in a position where we had tried to be everything for everybody, if you will. They have 3 patients who need to be transferred at once. We'll bring an extra crew in and take 3 transfers at once. We now have looked to cut the expense side of that, realizing that the revenue side of that is becoming harder to manage. Looking at doing single transfers at a time, with some exceptions. I mean, if you walk in there with a heart attack, we'll treat you as an 911 patient and get you to the cath lab in Manchester or Concord. So I think that the changes that we make aren't wholesale business model changes, but they're operational changes to address these, what we see as both need for service as well as the reimbursement for service. That kind of does a better job of answering. I don't know, Leslie, if that's...
No, that's great.
Okay.
Anybody else? Any other questions about this?
I guess I have one more.
Yeah.
Nicole, is there any realistic concern about towns individually pulling out if they saw big expenses? Is that a concern at all for us, or they really are kind of, they have to go along for the ride essentially?
I think they're very happy with the service that we provide. First off, we provide a really top-notch service. We have advanced life support on every ambulance, if not paramedic level support on every ambulance, which very few small, I can't think of any other rural communities that can offer that. I mean, it really is top notch. And it greatly improves the quality of life that we're able to offer in this region, whether people realize it or not. It's there for them. So, I mean, at one point, Greenfield did move out. They went to Wilton Library Ambulance. Interestingly enough, Temple moved from Wilton Library Ambulance to Peterborough. And so it was a little bit of a wash there. It works very well. I think our communities are all pretty happy with it. I haven't heard any complaints. My understanding is actually we're being considered to provide the service for Greenfield this year.
Greenfield voters will be making the decision whether or not to come back to Peterborough for their ambulance or remain with Wilton Library.
Right. So I think that really speaks again to that quality of service that we are able to provide.
Great, very informative, thank you. A lot of good questions. Up next, we're ready for our bond hearing for the proposed municipal campus and fire ambulance facility. Nicole's going to give a brief overview, and then Janice Lamenda from HCK Architecture will give us an in-depth review.
Nice job on that presentation. The amount of information that you retain in your head is completely unbelievable.
This is pretty much all I've done for the last 5 days is work on this.
All
Thank you, I
4
appreciate
months.
that. All right, so as Tyler said, I'll be giving a brief, and I'm going to make this as brief as possible because it is a long story, background on the project and the recent work of the Municipal Campus Task Force. And then Janet will jump in. She's the principal of HKT Architects, and she'll be presenting an overview of the project concept.
Can everybody outside here, can you just put
There's about 20 people out there.
Most of the people out there are staff of the Peterborough Fire Rescue, and so they're pretty familiar with this. So, I mean, I can try to yell if y'all need me to. Now they're shaking their heads. They're
There's still a few chairs in here.
There's two chairs.
3 or 4 chairs that people want to
Just want to make sure, because this is important.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, to that point, we are streaming it live. We are recording it, and this recording will be online as soon as possible after this meeting. So you're able to rewatch it and gather all the details for your heart's content. All right, so again, for that brief as possible background, many committees have been working on the municipal facilities question over the years. And as you can see, the first report I've listed here is from 2004, but the work really goes many years further back. And I'm not going to go into any great depth about those reports or into the particular needs of the fire rescue department. I'm going to point you to peterboroughprojects.info to get all that information. To find out more, we do have a tour that Chief Walker recorded and is posted to YouTube. We have a whole lot more information there that you can dive into. But over and over again, the studies concluded that the fire and ambulance facility should be relocated to Evans Flats off of Evans Road, roughly at the town-owned land at the corner of Elm Street and Route 101, just so everyone is oriented and we know what we're talking about. Now, I'm take a little sidetrack. In 2018, town meeting voted in favor of a municipal facilities review for the design, cost estimate, and construction drawings of a new highway garage adjacent to the wastewater treatment facility on Water Street for the 2019 town meeting. I will explain why this is relevant. After that article was passed, we did do that work. We looked into the costs and we came up with an estimate of $3.6 million. When we brought that to the then Budget Committee and Select Board, they challenged us to look for something that was a little bit less expensive. So we looked at some other options. Again, we had that new facility on Water Street for $3.6 million. We were asked to explore retrofitting the SDE building off of Route 202 South, which was on the market at the time. The purchase cost of that was $2.995 million, and we really didn't get any further into it than that. It clearly would have been much too expensive. And we looked at the cost of renovating the highway garage in its current location on Elm Street, and that estimate came in at $2.5 million. While we were doing those estimates and feasibility studies, we looked at, would we still be able to move the fire and ambulance facility to Elm Street, to that campus up there, if we kept the highway garage in its location? And by doing a very, very quick, very rough analysis, we were able to say, yes, there was enough room up there to do both. So we held 2 public information sessions, and the select board voted unanimously to support renovating the highway garage at its current location on Elm Street, and the $2.5 million bond passed at town meeting. Between the 2019 and 2020 town meetings, we contacted the Harris Center for Conservation Education about the availability of the land that they own between the community center and Route 101. The Harris Center reported that it understands the town's right to take this land and is willing to work with the town to provide for public safety and to enhance conservation values. And so with the Harris Center's permission, we dug some test pits and concluded that the site would provide enough buildable area to locate the fire and ambulance facility definitively. And so at that point, we paused work on the highway garage renovation to allow for shared efficiencies in the new campus design by figuring out where to locate the cold storage, how to design the whole site, where to lay out utilities, et cetera, et cetera. We went to the 2020 town meeting where we had a $200,000 article passed that would fund the final design and cost estimates for the new fire and ambulance facility on the municipal campus off of Elm Street. The goal was to have a final design and cost estimates ready for the 2021 town meeting, and the article passed, but of course, we all know what happened. Everything got put on hold. But not indefinitely. Beginning in June of 2021, the select board had impaneled the municipal task force, which includes all of the people you see here on the screen. Many of these people, it's actually really amazing. I looked back through when I was preparing for this presentation, I looked back through the membership on some of these prior committees that have been meeting since, before 2004. And you see some of these names kept coming up over and over and over again. We saw Rich Clark, we saw Roland Patton, we saw Alan Zeller, we saw Beth Alpha Cote, just kept, coming up in these meetings, and the massive amount of work that they put into moving this project along is incredible. And I don't think we would be here today if we didn't have those people doing that. But to get back, so we started meeting in June of 2021. HKT Architects was selected. We began working with Janet on the designs for the fire and ambulance facility and the municipal campus that we need to meet the priorities. And these are the priorities that the task force came up with. We really need to look at public safety, separating the emergency responder traffic from the public works traffic and from the public traffic. We need it to be sustainable. It needed to utilize energy technologies that keep us on track to meet the 2021 town meeting goals of 100% renewable energy by 2030. And we needed to lay out the campus in a way that potentially allows the police department to move off of Grove Street sometime in the future. It is important to keep in mind that we are still in the process of moving this from a conceptual plan to an actual design. Jan and her team will be working very hard to give us the final design, concepts, and a revised cost estimate ahead of the town meeting in May. And with that, I'm going to turn the presentation over to Janet.
Hi, everyone.
Hi, Janet, welcome.
Hi, Janet Samunda from HKT Architects, Principal. So I'm going to tell you a bit about the process that we use to develop a project like this. We started meeting and doing what we call programming to determine what was going to be provided on this site, and we met with people from the fire department, the police department, and the community center, and talked about what they needed, and that's called programming, and we did that process first. We also had the wetlands flagged and the site surveyed, so we knew exactly what was on this site and what we would have to work with. Oh, I forgot we did talk to the DPW as well, I apologize for that. And so then we were able to come up with concepts. So we had some basic criteria that we were working around, and that's to talk about the fire and ambulance building. Our biggest challenge in all of these projects is to make an operationally sound apparatus floor and support spaces to support the mission of a fire department. We have employee work and living areas. We have administration spaces. We have public meeting, training, emergency operations center. We have communications, and we have the building support. So that makes up the core of the building spaces, and those were all developed in concert with all the end users to understand how they work and how they live and how they operate. We also had to worry about our user groups on this site, and we're trying to protect both people and vehicles, and most importantly, the people, especially because of the community use building, which has a variety of end users that come to the site at a variety of times. It was absolutely amazing to hear how many things happen at this community center and their needs. And then we were worried about site circulation. We had to have the separation of the emergency service, public works, vehicles, and then pedestrian vehicles as well. And then, of course, fire truck turning radiuses, which are significant, moving a ladder truck or a pumper is not space. We're also looking to improve the site as far as improvements to stormwater management, the wetlands buffers, and deal with invasive species. All the things, when we leave the site, we want to improve it. And then we were worried about the public use of outdoor spaces because of the community center's needs. Trying to plan for an events plaza, access to the gardens, and potential sidewalk access to the Shaw's and CVS from the center of town. So those were the criteria. And then, of course, all the things that Nicole talked about, energy efficiency and all those other factors. Good. Turn it through someone's head. So the next thing we look at are total project costs. Okay, what is it going to cost to build this building? And there are, you can do an estimate of project costs many different ways, but the primary way to do it is to look at the hard cost of construction, the soft cost of construction, the owner's contingency, and escalation of market factors, conditions. So what's hard construction? That's the actual brick and mortar of the building, the construction of a 2-story fire and ambulance building, and everything related to the site, including demolition of the existing building, earthwork, utilities, pavements, landscape, lighting, all the things that make up a final project. And then soft construction costs, I think we heard it earlier on another project, but that is basically related to architectural engineering and especially engineering fees, owner's project management, printing, legal, permitting, furniture, fixtures, and equipment, commissioning, testing, inspections, communications, utility company back charges, and moving costs to say, to describe it. There could be more, there could be less on every project, but those are the typical soft costs you see. There's an owner's contingency, and that covers anything else that happens on the project or asked for by the owner themselves. And then escalation of market conditions. When we do an estimate, we're doing it in the year that we produce the estimate, so this is early 2022, but this building wouldn't be constructed until well beyond this. If town meeting approves this, we would go into a design phase. It would take up to 8 to 9 months, and then it would be bid, and you look at construction in the midpoint of construction. So that's the time frame for escalation of market conditions. And it's particularly important right now because I'm sure all of you know prices are gone up dramatically during COVID. It's affected all of our lives, shopping, gas, everything, and it has certainly affected construction. And so it's a particular concern right now. So what are we building through this project? We're building right now the plan is to do a 1-story apparatus building which contains all of the vehicles that the fire department and ambulance service provides, and then a 2-story building for the remainder of the needs, which included all those living quarters, administration spaces, meeting rooms, communications, and building support, which are mechanical, electrical, fire protection spaces. It's also planned for future expansion so that should the town decide to bring the police department over, that we haven't done anything that would prevent that happening, and that's the planning of it goes. I want to remind everybody, this building is a 24/7 building, so it's operating round the clock, 365 days a year, unlike a school or a library that has hours to close down, so there are different needs for that. There will be emergency generators for this building to keep it functioning during any kind of an emergency. It must meet all relevant current codes, building codes, life safety, lateral forces, which are earthquake and wind primarily, and energy codes, which are pretty standard stuff, and then all local codes and requirements of the town of Peterborough. I want to tell you a little bit about what a typical construction of a building like this is. You're not building a house, you're not building a small addition, you're building a building that's going to potentially last for 50 years. That's the plan. Our typical exterior walls are 18 inches thick, and it's made up of masonry, and this case proprietary an airspace, 6 inches of mineral fiber insulation, which goes a long way to meeting your questions about net zero, air vapor barriers, exterior sheathing, metal studs, and gypsum wallboard. We don't put any insulation on the inboard of the building. In a building like this, everything is outboard nowadays. It's been more than 20 years since we put insulation in the center of a building, just so you understand how that builds. Roofing is steel frame, metal deck, sheathing, vapor barriers, again, 8 inches of rigid insulation, protection boards, and a fully adhered membrane roofing. That's a concept for how this building would be built. Again, all towards super insulating this building to help meet the needs of the net zero. And then just to remind everybody that insulation and air vapor barriers are now required by code to go from the foundations up across the walls, across the roof, and down. There's no breaks in them anymore, and this is all to provide a tighter and better building. And then interior spaces, there are some ratings in a building like this that have to be built for egress primarily, and other things required by code. So that's how typical construction might look like. And just to tell you a little bit about our planning and construction of the apparatus area, the apparatus area and the associated spaces with it are all designed to minimize and contain harmful contaminants. And you all know when there is a fire or there's an event, the firefighters, the responders come back and they are covered in things that you wouldn't want to track from their trucks out into the building. So there is a new way of looking at all of this to minimize the containment of that, and that's part of the planning for this project. There's also a desire to make all the layout of the vehicles work so that the responders can get from wherever they are when the call comes to their vehicles quickly. If you go into the existing building right now, it's a maze to get the things. Everything is so tightly packed in there. And so, that's really important. This has typical wall and roof construction that I just described. Just to give you a sense of the floor, the thickness of these floors is at least 8 inches to handle the weight of the trucks, fully loaded with water or whatever, and equipment. And we would plan probably on radiant heat in the floors because it is really the best for fire station. It keeps it slip resistant and it keeps the trucks dry, which is really important. The floor to the structure above is about 20 feet so that the trucks can be in and somebody can get on top of that truck to fully load it, to take care of the top of the truck as well. And then, of course, our rooftop is going to be designed to support green roofs or solar arrays, hopefully to meet those needs. The same thing for the office and staff living area that's more standard. But again, we're trying to lay this out so if you're in that part of the building, you're getting to the apparatus floor as quickly as possible. Floor-to-floor height typically is, in a building like this, is about 14 feet. Again, steel frame construction, steel decking, concrete slabs. Again, we're going down to 5 inches of concrete reinforced slab, probably in that building. And then we're talking about commercial, mechanical, and electrical systems, plumbing, and fire protection. You have to meet the code. You have to provide heat, air conditioning, ventilation, all of that along the way. And again, the rooftops are all going to be designed to allow for solar arrays and green roofs, whatever is decided. What does that mean? So this is the total project cost, and I have to say this is based on a concept plan and not a detailed fine-tuned plan. We are going to work in the next up until town meeting to try to refine this quite a bit if we can. But this is the this is a professional cost estimator providing these numbers, and it's based on history, what the costs are now. And I have to say that I talked to him just today about this, is that the numbers are sort of all over the place right now. They are up and not down right now, but they're going up. And we are hoping for it to settle in back to a more normal escalation, but we're not seeing that right now. So that's what it is. So the fire and ambulance building right now is $13.5 million, and the ambulance site, and I'll back this up just one to show you if I can. That is the site that we're talking about when I talk about the fire department, and when I talk about the rest of it, the site, we're talking about the right side of the plan, which is where the community center is. Maybe I should explain a little bit about the plan, just so you know. So everything in the red color represents the proposed fire and ambulance building. There is an apparatus apron in the front leading out to Elm Street, and there is a driveway and parking to the left along the buffer that is right there. And then what we're planning to do to protect everybody on this site is to enhance the road that already exists to the right of the community center that goes to the rear of the site where there's material storage for the DPW now, and make that the primary entry place for the community center. So we are creating parking along that zone to the right, and then in the rear for overflow. And we're also looking to develop a new crossing for the DPW also. So there's two ways out of the DPW site. They'll be able to, excuse me, I have to stand up to do this. They'll be able to still come out this way, but they'll also be able to come out that way, and that's an enhancement. So that is the current plan that we are looking at.
Can I stop you for a second?
Yes.
Is half of that red building, or at least somewhere around a third or whatever, future police department?
No, that is
Where'd that go?
that is the plan for the fire and ambulance building. The new build, if there's a new building ever, it will go back here where that parking lot is.
Okay.
Yeah.
And where's the DPW?
DPW is back here. So right now, you drive right down the center, and there's a gate, and that's the main building you see.
How many square feet is this building?
The proposed is proposed at 30,000 square feet.
So, Janet, do you want to finish, and then I'll...
Yeah, I just thought I'd better comment, but so...
And then we'll get questions from everybody.
So the fire and ambulance site is $1,446,330 projected. And that, of course, includes demolition of the existing building, all the utilities, all the site demolition, all the development of the site to a final form. And the total of those two things is $14.9 million. And the second piece, which I described on to the right, that's the community center DPW site. That was $1.12 million, basically, and that develops all of the parking, the driveways, the crossing, and anything to support that side of the site. The soft cost, we're estimating right now, it's a range, but we're picking the middle of the range at about 25%, which is worth about $4 million. We put the other contingency at 5%, which is pretty common, at $803,000. And those two numbers come out to $4.8 million. And then the final thing is the escalation at 7% right now, which is $1,461,799. Now, escalation runs at a wide range. A normal escalation in a normal time runs about 3.8% to 4%. This number at 7%, we've seen it as high as 10% in the past 2 years. So we are hoping and predicting that it's going to come down, but it's not going to come down to 3.5%, 3.8%, 4% that you might see in other more normal years. But every year it's going to keep going up. So we're going to add that 1.46 million to the project every year for the next maybe year or two before it starts coming down a little bit. Right?
So I'll take questions from, or I'll...
Well, if I can, just real quick before you do that. So the warrant article language that I have right now is for a bond in the amount of $23,144,649. As Jan said, they're going to continue working to refine that, to refine the designs, and with that, refine the cost estimates between now and town meeting. So I can almost guarantee you that there's going to be a motion to amend that warrant article in May. But I had to put a number in now, and so we're using this very conservative, very careful, however you want to word it, cost estimate that we've gotten. I think this is a good number. As you can see, it's already started to come down from when we first looked at this a few weeks ago, when we were talking about a $24.6 million project estimate for the project. So it's...
Could you just repeat the number you gave us?
Sure. $23,144,649.
Thank you.
And you'll see that again as we move into the votes to recommend. I'm going to have all the warrant article language up on the screen for you.
So are you adding the renewable energy options to the 22.3 to get your number?
Yes, I added that 800,000 in because that is a requirement now for us. So that's a cost that is going to go in. And again, to be careful with the estimate to make sure that we have a not to exceed number, I added the top end of that into the warrant article. I wanted to say just a couple more things. One thing that I didn't address, one of the criteria that we also had in the background was to improve those wetlands that we will be taking from the Harris Center. One of the things that the site currently does not have is any kind of stormwater mitigation whatsoever. So everything, whether it's snow melt or rain or what have you, all that water just comes off of the site and into those wetlands completely untreated. A big chunk of this project is to improve that stormwater treatment, which will then just naturally improve the quality of the wetlands there. We're also going to be looking, even though we're pushing up into the wetlands buffer that goes all the way around that site, of course, we are looking to making some significant improvements in that buffer as well, which will include stormwater management that you can kind of see blocked out if you look at, that's right there. So if you look right at that, you see the corner of the CVS site, right below that, there's a little inverted triangle. That's where we're imagining the stormwater detention to go in and that where that treatment will occur. So there's that. We're also looking at improving the green spaces. As you can see, there's a lot of conceptual trees and whatnot on the site. We are looking to really do that, to really do a lot to improve the look, the character, and the invitedness of that gateway to Peterborough. So that's all been part of this plan too. Those were all very important things as we considered it. You can see we are very thoughtful about how the public will get to the community center and how they'll get to the fire station as well by including a public entrance, which you can see if you look at the building, it's on the right-hand side of the building, it's that funny little bump out there. That's a public entrance. So that's keeping, the public is coming in and out, whether it's for, classroom exercise training, visiting, what have you, separate from the emergency responders that are flying in and out from the other side. So all this was very carefully considered. Again, the municipal task force, municipal facilities task force did an incredible job brainstorming, being patient with us as we tried to figure out how to do this through COVID. Jan and her team have done an incredible job. And I think that we're really at the beginning of what will end up being a great project.
All right, any other questions from the board? Bill Kennedy, yeah.
I have several questions. You tell us we're planning for 30,000 square feet in building. What's the cost per square foot?
Right now, that cost is $450 a square foot.
$450 per square foot.
For the building?
And that's for the building?
That's just the building.
I noticed that we are doing a lot of site work around the community center. Was that intended in the original project?
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. It's important. So if you can imagine how you enter the community center now, you enter it through a very broad mixed parking and driveway access with the Asplin trucks and the public works vehicles going through there. If you look at that plan, you can see that there is no way that you can build the fire and ambulance facility and still maintain that entrance. So in order to access the site, the first thing that, to allow the public to continue to access and use that site, really the first thing you have to do is build that second entrance that will go to the community center and also provide that secondary access to the public works to get to the back to the highway garage.
Well, I noticed that you had taken out a number of features from some of the original designs, particularly all that asphalt that went up to the DPW and several of the parking areas.
Yep.
And yet we've improved, or we've included quite a bit of parking on the, particularly the right side of the community center. Why didn't we include, instead of having that space, that open space with the white rectangle there for public, why don't we have a driveway as we currently do coming up in there, and using that as access and getting rid of all that asphalt that's on the right-hand side of the building?
You certainly could, but you really want to have that flexible event space somewhere, and that's a really great location for it. That allows the farmers market to continue to operate there. They'll have good parking and good access for all the people that attend the farmers market. There's also some recreational activities that happen out there. The bocce ball, bocce court will need to be moved, but the bocce court is right out there. So that it's really, it's desirable to have that location with parking right next to it for an event space. You have handicap parking that's right there, right in front. So that provides great accessibility for folks that are, have mobility issues. They'll still be able to park pretty close and get right to whether it's the farmer's market or anything else that's happening out there.
But we are considering modifications and improvements to the community center. Aren't we being a little bit premature in terms of designing around it like this?
I don't think so, because the focus on the community center is really within the walls of the community center and not the exterior. So we're looking at building envelope improvements, we're looking at improvements to the HVAC system, we're looking at the floor and replacing the floor, and those other things that go really inside the walls. There's some safety issues that need to be addressed in there and what have you. But those are inside the community center. It's not envisioned that the actual use of the community center is going to change so significantly. We're still going to hold voting there. We still have the food pantry there Monday through Friday, 9 to noon. We still have Southern New Hampshire services operating out of there now. They have an after-school program. We also have the senior programs there. So it's a heavily used facility, and we don't anticipate that that's going to diminish at any point. And if anything, these improvements really seek to improve all of that, the use in that building, and the access to that building for all those different uses.
How many handicap parking spaces do you have on the community center?
On the community center?
Design.
Proposed, yep. Give me a second to count.
Well, Dan's looking, Rich Clark, you have a question?
Yeah, how many square feet do you have now?
Currently now, it's about 6,800 square feet.
So, how did you come up with 30,000 square feet?
So 30,000 is the gross figure. That includes circulation. I don't have the net figure, Janet, minus circulation.
Yeah, so programming suggested this building should be 34,000 square feet, not 30. But because of the plan we developed, it's a much more efficient building than we started out with programming. So we've actually driven that number down. So don't forget that the fire department doesn't have a big training room, meeting space, doesn't have this dispatch, doesn't have the center of storage, doesn't have all these mechanical spaces. So there's a couple different categories. And of that square footage, there's, somewhat closer to 10,000 of it is programmed for the shared spaces, and then the other is for the fire department. So there are two categories of programming. I don't have the exact split of the totals, but they are 30,000, but they were originally scheduled to be at 34.
So going back to your original question, Rich, the program, so when the fire department moved into the building in 71 that they're in now, they were shoehorned into that building that's existed the building the town had for 30 years.
I'm not debating that.
So the process that went through is what's called the programming process, where we look at the apparatus that we have, and like we have some apparatus outside now, being able to move that inside. One of the things that has significantly changed since even the Michael and Weller study in 2004 was, as Janet mentioned, the separation of clean versus dirty. whether it's turnout gear, the ability to have vehicle smoke extraction systems, vehicle exhaust extraction systems, having the ability to separate your living space from your apparatus, having adequate training space for our staff, as well as the fact that now we do operate a 24/7 department where we have 4 people there 24 hours a day, including people sleeping overnight. So through the programmatic study, we arrived at that square footage. One of the things I think, as Janet said at one point, and correct me if I'm wrong, Janet, but you actually have some concerns as to whether or not we have enough space, particularly on the apparatus floor, for where we are now and going forward. So that's sort of the process. One thing I think that's important to look at here is we have not yet sat down, because it's not part of this phase, we have not sat down and looked at exactly, okay, how many desks do we need? How many actual dorm rooms will we have? How big will our kitchen area be? How big, what will be the true training space? So some of that may reduce the square footage as we look at that. The other thing, and again, correct me if I'm wrong here, Janet, in looking at some of that, if we are looking at solar arrays, you create some interior space for your mechanicals as opposed to, the old rooftop units that you had. So as we get into final design considerations, including the layout and the adjacency of our different facilities, that may very well shrink. Is that a fair assumption?
Yeah, when your programming number is your absolute, possibilities of what it could be, and you hope to drive that number down.
My only concern is the price tag. I mean, I just can't, for 30,000 square feet, like I've told you at the meeting, I was all in at 16, and that's stretching me. And 22, 23, and the escalation, because it is going to go up, so you're going to get less for your bang. It's too much. It's just too much for me. That's all.
I'm going to continue to take questions from the board. I do see some hands in the audience, and we'll definitely get to you guys. Ronnie,
I need a couple of minutes for this, so bear with me. I have one recommendation. I have a couple of questions that I'd like to have you address. The recommendation is, I would suggest that the language of the warrant article be changed to read to a sum up to the figure that you just gave us, rather than the sum of, with the understanding that in projects like this, we may not need to use the full $23 million. The comment I have to make is, first of all, I have to start with a disclaimer. I understand the need of the fire department. I totally get that. What I do have questions about or concerns about is the way we're going about this. First of all, can anybody tell me right at the moment what the increase in the debt load is going to be annually if we take a bond for the $23 million and plus dollars? What is the increase in the debt service load going to be?
It will depend on what we get for an interest rate.
Okay, well, I'm prepared to tell you what the debt load would have been on the basis of $25 million that was floated recently. If we go to the New Hampshire Bond Bank and check their current rate, it's 2.4%. If we apply for a bond of term of 25 years, at that interest rate for $25 million, then the annual repayment would be something like $1.3 million. Our current repayment schedule is $1.8 million, and at $25 million, that repayment schedule would go up to $3.1 million per year. So I really want to see the figures on what's going to happen to long-term debt and the repayment schedule. My second concern is all of this is happening, as far as I can tell, without the involvement of the CIP. And they're the group in town who are responsible for looking after and planning for long-term capital improvements, capital projects. And I don't think we've given them an opportunity to weigh in on this and make whatever recommendations they might have to make. And finally, I'm at my third point. My understanding of most projects is that you hire an architect, the architect comes up with construction documents, construction drawings. At that point, you take the construction drawings and you put it out to bid. And if I'm wrong, I see some head shaking. My point is, are we putting the cart before the horse? Do we have actual construction documents at this point that we can now take and put out to bid to various construction companies? Is that where we are or not?
Well, no, we're definitely not there. Let me try to take this somewhat in order. It has been through CIP. The fire department has brought a new fire and ambulance facility to CIP many times. CIP has toured the facility and has agreed there is a definite need, which is why we've had the warrant article to study it and to prepare for this bond, where we are right now, to prepare for this bond hearing and to prepare to put a warrant article at town meeting so the voters can decide whether or not, again, yes, it's expensive. There's no question. There is no question. There isn't a single person involved in this project who doesn't recognize how incredibly expensive building a new fire and ambulance facility is. But every single person who's been involved in this project, I think will probably look at this and will tell you, and as will anyone who's in the construction trades right now, it's not going to get any cheaper to build it either. If you look at the original estimates that were done, I believe by Michael and Weller in 2004, and you were to apply escalation to that estimate, this is where you are. It really is this expensive. It's just, inflation has changed, the cost of building has gone up, the cost of oil and everything else involved in construction has gone up in that intervening time. And so just like with every other project, yes, it is expensive, yes, we could delay it, yes, we could study it more, but it's not going to get any cheaper. As far as the question of, are we putting the cart before the horse, we're really not. In fact, what you need to do is, and I know this sounds very counterintuitive, and certainly not how anyone would do it if you were a private sector, or if you were building your own home or something along those lines, you would do exactly what you just said. You would, you would have some money saved up, you would hire an architect, the architect would design it, you would get some quotes, you would figure out what the cost is, and then you would go to the bank and say, I need a loan for this amount of money. But unfortunately, municipal government and the public sector don't work that way. We don't have that kind of opportunity to raise the money and then go, or to do the study, to go out to bid, and then wait another year to get all the way back around to town meeting and say, okay, this is the bond that we want. Because by the time we do that, that estimate isn't going to be worth anything anymore. Those bid guarantees will have all expired. We're looking, and again, just about anyone who works in this industry will tell you, we're looking at the Coldstone Springs project right now, where we have some estimates coming in saying these are only good for a couple of weeks. This guarantee is not going to exceed a month. I can't promise you any more than that. That's where we are in the construction world right now. I think Janet can say that for other projects that she's worked on, but it's certainly been our experience. So to do it the way that you would if you were a private person or had a private company isn't an option for us.
Got it.
Yeah. And there's no way we could get a special town meeting. A judge would never look at this and say that there's an emergency that you're responding to, which would require you to hold a special town meeting in order to respond to it appropriately. The judge is going to say, sorry folks, wait for your next town meeting before you ask to raise that money through bond. As for the first point, the question about how to word the warrant article, I don't word the warrant articles, actually. I ask our bond counsel to do that for us because the wording has to be very specific. So I'll ask her if we can make a change like that. But I've got to make sure that it doesn't preclude us from doing something like we just actually were able to do with Coldstone Springs, which is, even though the cost went up on the whole project, because we had offsetting grant revenue, we were able to 100% offset those costs without going back to town meeting for another vote. So I want to make sure that should we get some kind of funding from the federal government, which I'm still really holding out hope for, we'll be able to apply that to offset costs. We do have the $700,000 in ARPA money. We received half of that last year, which the selectmen have accepted, and we have a warrant article to create a capital reserve fund to put that money in that is earmarked for this project and cannot be spent on anything else unless it goes back to town meeting.
Good, thank you.
And then we'll get the second tranche of that later this year. And so we do have some money, some offsetting revenues. It's not a lot, in the face of the whole project cost, but it's there, and we're definitely going to use that. There's some other aid for firefighter grants that we're going to be applying for. They're relatively small dollars, again, in the grand scheme of things, but we're going to apply for everything we possibly can to bring down this cost. Most of us are taxpayers too, so it's certainly not, I'm not excited about this, but it's necessary. It's really important. The facility they're operating out of right now is deficient in so many ways. It would take me a whole nother 15-minute presentation just to get through them all.
Mr. Chair, follow-up question?
Sure, follow up.
Very quickly, we saw a list of a number of people in the community who have participated in this vetting process. Could you talk to us just very briefly about maybe how many times you met or how many people were involved? I'm asking this because I want to know the oversight that has taken place in vetting the project.
The task force is...
Very briefly, very briefly, please.
The task force was a select board appointed task force. They're appointed by the select board. All their meetings have been public meetings, noticed appropriately. The group has met 7 times.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, the group has met 7 times since their first meeting.
Thank you very much.
Yep.
And also just the select board appointed members from various committees that had they were basically stakeholders. So we had Valerie Jenkins from the CIP committee, Peter LaRoche from the Zoning Board of Adjustment, Colin Murdo from the Heritage Commission, Rob Fox, and then Kate Kuhn from the Recreation Committee, John Hampson as a member of the Fire Department, Sarah Steinberg-Heller, who's on the Planning Board, Bill Kennedy, of course, Select Board Representative, Rich Clark, Budget Committee Representative, Roland Patton, citizen at large at this point, even though I think he served on every single one of these committees at one point or another. Alan Zeller, who's also served on a fairly large number of these committees. Matt Lundstedt, a current member of the Conservation Commission. Beth Alpacote, who's Master Plan Steering Committee representative, and then, of course, us, the staff.
Thank you.
Yep.
All right, Carl.
Thank you. Bill Taylor mentioned how smoothly we passed through the town budget because we had gone over it in so much detail with so many good presentations. In the case of this particular one, we've had some excellent presentations over the years, as you said, and they've looked different almost every time. This is the first time, as a member of the Budget Committee, and certainly never as a member of the CIP, have I seen this particular plan or these particular numbers. So to ask us on the Budget Committee to make a recommendation one way or the other is to assume that we're way smarter than I am to absorb what we're hearing tonight. I would like to know if the programmatic study that you talked about, which would be, to me, the best way to answer the question that came from Rich over here as to why there's a difference between the current one and what we're talking about, is that available for us to review?
Yeah, all those documents are all available. I think we actually have, we'll back up. As I said in my presentation to the Budget Committee and Select Board and looking over the whole budget, it is not, my own opinion, it is not reasonable to compare the current programmatic study to the building we're in now. The building we are in now was never intended to be a fire station. The starting point for any discussion of program really should be the 2005 study by Michael and Laura, because that was the first time the town of Peterborough ever looked at what their fire department did and their ambulance service did and attempted to make a determination what was needed for a facility. So that really is the starting point, not the building we're in now.
Right, I'm not suggesting that we are going to make our decision based on a comparison, but
Right.
if the programmatic study is the definition of why we are this size, I would like a chance to see that before making a recommendation on whether this is the right amount of money to
And
spend.
again, I'll defer to the select board with this. The intention of the select board in designating the task force and in having representatives from all of the various committees that are stakeholders on the task force was to ensure that those committees would be aware of the process we were going through. Programmatic study involving police, fire, DPW, and recreation department were discussed in those meetings. And those meeting minutes are available on the website, along with how that goes through. So, we certainly can provide you with any of that and you can look at that. But this was not, at no point in time was this done in the shade of dark. This was done in full transparency.
There's no suggestion that there was anything not transparent about this. However, this is the biggest number we've seen for years on this budget committee. And to be seeing it for the first time in any kind of concrete sense on the same night that we're supposed to make a recommendation is very difficult, particularly when information does exist in the form of this programmatic study out there. There are a number of questions I would have that may or may not be answered in that report, and we've raised a couple of issues here tonight already. For example, if we are incurring expense in building some of this parking space on the right rather than doing a direct line through in order to preserve event space, is that something for the fire department or is that something for the community center to be taking up?
So actually, it's for the preservation of public safety by separating the public traffic from the emergency responder traffic. That's the goal.
Oh, I'm sorry, that wasn't the same answer we had before, I think. But
Well, no, it is. We do want to preserve event space in the front, but the real goal of having that second access is to make sure that the public is able to access the community center, even though there are ambulances or fire trucks coming in and out, or emergency responders coming in to respond to those emergencies. We wanted to make sure that safety is improved. Make it an even safer site than it is today. And that's the easiest way to do it, is to build that in the most intelligent way to do it. The task force found is to build that separate access. And in fact, we do already have that access there. That's an existing road that goes back to what is right now. It's a gravel road that goes back to a storage site, a material storage site that the public works
I was offering that as an example of an instance in which the plan isn't necessarily clear to me as being fully justified as being part of the fire station. Now, it may be that everything is fine. In fact, I do trust the people involved in this very thoroughly. I have seen the current fire station. I've visited this site, and I think that people have been very responsible. But at the same time, my role as a member of the Budget Committee is to be able to say to the people of Peterborough that I recommend this based on what I know, not on whom I trust. And if there is information in the form of this programmatic study, and I have other questions we could ask, such as whether this kind of square footage is equivalent to what we see in other towns, and having looked at what's available online, there is quite a range of options out there, so it's not obvious to me that this is appropriate. I'm actually fairly easy to convince, but I need to have documents in front of me rather than have the numbers come to me the same night as I see this conceptual thing and expect me to make a recommendation on it.
Can I just ask, how does the size and scope of this building compare? Didn't Hopkinton build a firehouse in the last half dozen years or so?
I don't know. That's not something that we looked at. One of the things that we tried to really stay focused on was building the building that the service needs, and not to try to replicate what another community has done, because there's no real apples to apples when you talk about the service.
But I'm just trying to put the size in perspective.
Sure.
I mean, we built a Catholic church in town. That was 16,000 square feet, which Rich said is a pretty big building. Shaw's is what, 40,000 square feet?
I'm not sure.
So, this is on the size and scale of the Shaw's, or, and like Paul says, it's being presented to us, you know, pretty much for the first time with nothing to accept other than, you know, you telling us we need it without really seeing anything.
In terms of details, and I hesitate to get into it without architectural understanding of the plans, or seeing the plans, or having them developed, my understanding of construction is that things change when the architects get their hands on it, and quite dramatically sometimes. But I'll give you one example that I think I heard here, and I'm not sure I heard it correctly. It is that an 8-inch cement floor would be needed. And I don't know what part of the building that is, but I thought it was for the trucks.
It's the trucks, correct.
I think my garage has an 8-inch thick floor. It would be vastly, I'm sure it has to be vastly larger than that, and cement is very expensive. So that would be one minor detail that we wouldn't understand, or we would question, or I would question, let's put it that way.
Just so you know, I'm building 2 fire stations right now. They both have 8-inch concrete floors.
I don't know about the ground,
Yeah.
what's been done under the ground here. It's a wetland area. I would question it to a degree.
Okay.
One other little addition to that is that, for example, and again, you didn't want to compare other towns, but the town of Groton has 11,000 people, and it has I got the number here, an 18,000 square foot new fire station within the last few years. Their prices are significantly different. And again, there's with an escalation clause, because another town that did this whole process surveyed all the towns around them and said, this is what it costs per square foot and what square footage we're using per our population. So they rate it by population. And we can't necessarily make a judgment without going through these numbers. And I don't want to do this ahead of time. I want to do it after I've heard the numbers.
Yep.
And again, I agree with you about the 30,000 square feet, or at least I question it. And I wouldn't question you. I'm saying we just heard it. We never know what square footage it was last week. So that's where we're coming from. Some minor architectural experiences. We would say things change dramatically. This is a flat roof, as I understand it. The drainage system, we didn't hear much about the drainage of the flat roof. I know it's a 50-year building. Again, there's going to be a lot of water out there, and there's going to be a lot of ice as a result of it. So drainage will be very important, and when the architects finally say, this is what you've got to do, or the asphalt people, and the thickness of the asphalt is another consideration. I'd go one step further and saying, I think it'd be a great idea to have the fire department there. What would the future cost be for the fire department? Why not at least discuss that at this point? I'm sorry, the police.
Yeah.
Thank you. What would that be potentially? Because there'd be another bond involved.
Yes.
Following up or during this period of time that our bond would not be completely paid off. So those are the kinds of things, they've triggered my thinking about, and I was thinking about it. So I just want to add those probably minor details that I know turned out to be 100 other details. I believe they do.
There are probably a million other details, to be quite honest, because as I said, and as Janet said, this is still very much a conceptual. This was responding to all the criteria that we listed out. It was also looking to see what could fit into the site. Those, hash lines that you see all the way around that site, those are the wetlands buffers. It's an incredibly tight and difficult site, and that's one of the things that made this very complicated, and one of the reasons why we couldn't just copy and paste a building from another community onto that location. One of the other things that we looked at, obviously, as you mentioned, the police station, and making sure that there was space for it should the town choose to move that up in the future. Well, one of the other things that we've talked about that I, didn't really address at all in this presentation was what are the benefits to moving the fire and ambulance service out of the downtown. Now you have a piece of property that the selectmen can sell and put that back on the tax rolls, and there is additional benefit to that as well. You've got potentially a mixed-use residential or commercial space on the tax rolls right in the downtown in a very desirable area. So there's a lot of moving parts here. Some of them that we can address before town meeting. We can certainly get all the documents that Carl wants available, get them up on the website. Everyone will be able to take a look at them. We can, give Janet the go-ahead to continue refining these conceptuals into a design that can be properly estimated and brought to us for consideration at town meeting. But there's a lot more work, and there's a lot more that needs to go into it. What you really see here is pretty much what we have right now. It's just boxes. It's boxes on a screen. It's boxes on a page. It's not refined at all yet. And that's why it's come to you fairly late. The municipal task force settled on a conceptual layout that they think makes the most sense, that met all the criteria very recently. And we saw the first estimates, I think it was January, right? The January meeting. And then Janet and her team went to work on putting some basic costs and basic estimates to that conceptual layout to see what it would cost. And that's what was presented just a few weeks ago to Municipal Task Force, and has been already refined down a little bit to be presented to you tonight. As far as time to consider, to learn more, we do have that. The reason why we've come as quickly as we have is, again, we're being compressed by the town meeting schedule. If we want to try to get something ready to go so that there can be some final designs and to go out to bid probably in fall at the earliest or early winter. I know we had talked about some dates.
Probably 8 to 9 months.
Yeah, 8 to 9 months at any rate after town meeting. We do need to get to work. It's not getting any cheaper, won't get any cheaper. What I can offer the budget committee right now is an opportunity. The reason why you're meeting tonight, of course, is not only for the public hearing, but it's also so you can make votes to recommend or not recommend warrant articles that's required by state law. I can't post a warrant without having those votes to recommend, and the warrant has to be posted this month. I wanted to avoid bringing the budget committee back together for a second meeting in March, so that's why I put the votes to recommend right after the budget hearing, and the bond hearing. What the budget committee could potentially have the opportunity to do, should they wish to do so, is make a vote to recommend moving the bond to the warrant, and then make a vote at town meeting whether or not they wish to recommend the project to the voters. And you would have to make that on the floor of town meeting. That's when the amendment would be presented. So that would provide another opportunity for the budget committee to reconsider, if you so chose.
You said you don't want to force the budget committee to meet again before the deliberative session. I suspect the budget committee, I don't speak for the budget committee, but as a member of the budget committee, I would be in favor of having a chance to look at the documents that you mentioned. And although you say it's boxes on boxes, there's something inside that box that we can see.
There really isn't yet.
I've seen drafts before. Are you pricing it out using less than you had before?
No, so there is a very basic, just schematic that shows, this would be administrative area, and this is the address.
That's fine, whatever it is.
Yeah.
I'd like to see that. I'd like to see the programmatic study and whatever else you think is relative in the way of detail. You put it online so the public can see it. And then I would suggest, as a member, that the budget committee meet again and take a vote before the town meeting on whether we recommend it.
Sure, okay.
But that's just my personal opinion. I'm not speaking on behalf of the budget committee.
Well, so the next meeting, the next regular select board meeting is March 15th, so that would be the date that we would look to do this.
We had a March 8th snow date for this meeting.
Yes, we have snow date, just in case, for whatever reason, we weren't able to meet tonight.
Could we use that date?
Certainly could meet next week if you wanted to.
Is that?
Or you could
I think the 15th would be better for us if that's what we want to do.
I think Mandy had a question, and this gentleman's been very patient waiting. If anybody else on the board has something after Mandy, we'll get that. And Bob will be after Mandy, and then we'll go to the public. I know Leslie also had a question, but this gentleman over here.
Yes, I was
first. No, hold on. After the board, and then I'll get you first from the public. Thank you, sir. Mandy, yeah.
Thank you, Tyler. My question's actually on the campus as a whole. I know that last year we voted to authorize a study, I believe, as to coming up with a total for what the renovations for the community center was gonna cost. And then, if I remember correctly, 2 or 3 years ago, we voted for a bond for renovations to the DPW building. Neither of those things have happened. Is there a timeline for when we're gonna get estimates to what those other 2 buildings are gonna cost?
Yep.
And is that gonna happen before town meeting, before we have to make this decision? Because I feel like we're looking at a campus, but we've only got 1/3 of it, or even 1/4, because the police department could even be another quarter.
Yep. So right now, we have architects looking at the community center. So that is underway.
Is there a timeline for?
I don't have it off the top of my head, Seth.
The consultants were actually in the building this week, and we're looking at 3 to 6 months, depending on what they find.
So definitely not before town.
Definitely not before town meeting, absolutely not.
How about the DPW building?
DPW, we did pass the $2.5 million bond. That $2.5 million bond has not been drawn yet. We were waiting to get an idea of what the layout of the campus looked like before we moved forward. Now that we have that, we're going to be able to move forward on that work.
Is it likely that $2.5 million is going to be enough to do that work, since it's such an old?
It seems unlikely it's going to be enough to do a complete reconstruction, like we had, originally talked about in 2019. Pretty confident though, and Seth, tell me if I'm wrong, we're pretty confident that we're going to be able to do the work that needs to get done there in order to keep it a facility that works. That will include building and cold storage for the trucks, include a new roof, and I think there will be more.
Yeah, there was considerable site work as well, but in terms of renovating the current structure and building the cold storage, the belief is still that we've got enough money to do so.
So those are potentially 2 bonds that will likely be coming forward in the next 2 years?
I'm not sure what the community center will be. And to be perfectly frank, I have absolutely no idea what is going to come out of that study and what the desires will be, not only of this group, but the Recreation Committee and anyone else interested in moving that project forward. So we'll see. It's too early to say what kind of work needs to get done and what the end goal will be.
If that project doesn't move forward, is the site work that you're wasted if that community center doesn't end up getting any renovations?
It's still going to get some renovations for sure. It will get some renovations. I just don't know what the extent of those renovations are yet. I really don't, and I can't possibly tell you what the cost of those renovations are going to be. Would they be done all at once? Would they be phased in? I don't know. I mean, there's too many things that we are waiting for the results of the study before we can start putting a plan together for that. But does this make sense? I think it absolutely does. I mean, the community center is a town facility that we use quite heavily. I don't see that changing anytime soon. I mean, we need it. We need that facility. It's integral to not only the recreational activities, it's integral to the human services activities that the community provides. It's integral to just how we operate our government. That's where we go to vote. That's the facility. And I think these are all significant improvements to that not only help that, but again, help us to reach that goal of really improving the safety of the site as a whole. And to be quite honest, I mean, when you look at, the breakdown of the cost for that work that's being done for the community center and the DPW site, I mean, yes, it's $1.1 million, but in the grand scheme of things, it's relatively small money for the investment and the improvement that it will make once we do that. Now, and that number, I'm sorry, that number also includes that sidewalk that goes to Shaw's and CVS that people have been asking for quite a long time to make that approach to that area much more walkable.
Okay, Bob, who's next?
The question I have is, I keep hearing town meeting, and I know it's up to the selectmen. Is this warrant going to be on the ballot or at town meeting where you only have 600 people upstairs or at the community center voting on $23 million?
So
I think it should be on the ballot myself. I don't know if you made decisions or not.
It can't be. It's a bond article, so by town charter, it's required to go to the open session.
I hope you have a place big enough.
The community center.
If I may, very briefly, so may we have, before the Budget Committee meets again, the information about the impact on the debt service? And it would be gravy to know something about what I know you can't do this exactly to the dollar, but about what the impact would be on the average
So what I
tax bill.
will be able to tell you is, using the valuation that we used for the 2021 taxes, I can use that, I have that number, obviously. That's the number that I would
Good.
be able to
Thank
base
you.
it on. That guarantees you absolutely nothing. I am actually kind of loath to use that number because I think that, you know, when we actually go to start repaying, we already have a number of building permits and occupancy permits that are going to increase our overall town valuation even this year, this upcoming tax year. So I think that the number that I give you is going to be a bit higher than it actually will ultimately end up being.
Okay.
But sure, I can give you that
Thank you.
estimate, absolutely. I think first I want to make sure that I have a consensus from the budget committee, if I can ask for one, as to whether or not you'd like to, you know, hold off on making a decision on this until another meeting. Is that, you know, like a show of hands would be fine, I think, for this.
15th, yeah.
Yeah, the 15th, does that sound good?
Where and when?
Here on the 15th at 6 o'clock?
Okay.
Okay, all right.
Could you clarify, sorry, Nicole,
Yep.
could you clarify the issue that came up before that you cannot call a separate town meeting and vote for this $25 million or $22 million?
Yep.
I heard you, but I
know, yeah.
just want to make you say it again, I guess.
Slightly archaic. So you're only allowed to call a special town meeting to raise and appropriate dollars with permission from a Superior Court judge. The Select Board has to petition the Superior Court for permission to do that. They will only grant that if they believe it is an emergency and is not something that can wait until the next town meeting for whatever reason it is. It's been used in neighboring towns when a bridge washed out and money needed to be raised to help offset some bridge aid money that they were getting, but they couldn't wait to the next town meeting. It was a very important connection in their community. So they held a special town meeting. That's just one example of holding a special town meeting for the purpose of raising and appropriating money that a judge will approve of. You can hold a special town meeting anytime you want, so long as there's no money attached to it. There are, of course, you know, a bunch of hoops that you have to jump through, but we did that in 2020, when we set up the South Peterborough TIF district. That was a January meeting, if I remember correctly. It didn't require going to a judge because we weren't asking to raise money, we were just establishing a district.
Can you go back to the map?
Yeah.
So back when the DPW was scaled back to a renovation, there was a very large part of that 2.5 million that was a combined fire department, DPW facility, brand new cold storage building.
Mm-hmm.
Correct?
Yeah, the cold storage building would be utilized by both in concept, yes.
Right, so does the fire department still need to have part of that?
I don't know. Again, you know, we're still very much in the conceptual portion of our design.
Right.
Would it be useful to have some? It may. I'm not sure. But certainly the cold storage building that we designed, you know, it's going to need to fit within the budget that we have now. And it's going to need to, first of all, be adequate to meet the needs of the highway department before we look at whether or not we can make it big enough for.
Okay, so what I'm wondering is if some of that 2.5 million that we've already appropriated could be saved. And correct me if I'm wrong, but we've already been raising and appropriating money to pay that bond?
Not, no.
So that 2.5 million isn't even on our tax bill.
Has not been drawn yet, no.
I have another question. I swear I saw another plan at some point that had the police department overlay on this and another garage for the police department. And now the police department's going over a parking lot?
No.
Under the parking lot.
So, right now, there is no need to build a police department because there's a police department on Grove Street. Rather than disturb additional space that is currently green and open to create what would be full parking if there was a giant chunk of building where that is. That area is being utilized as parking. And one of the reasons it is shown in a different color, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, Janet, is that is the ability to not necessarily be a paved area, be a non-permeable gravel type area, because, because the reality of that is, during construction of the fire and ambulance building, that's gonna be an area that's gonna have equipment on, and it's gonna be disturbed area anyway. So if we do at some point in time decide as a community to move a police station up there, that area is where a police station can go, and then subsequent parking, and you were right, there was continuing west from there towards the existing DPW building.
Or up.
Additional, up west towards DPW.
Okay.
There was additional
I got it.
parking, including a covered carport, so cruisers would be out of the elements and so forth.
Yeah, and the last iteration of this design that I saw, I swear, had like room breakouts in it. So there is a more detailed design.
So it actually didn't, yes and no. It did not have specific rooms, like it didn't say, this is a men's room, this is a locker room. It had chunks that showed administrative space for, fire prevention, fire chief and deputy chiefs, administrative space for lieutenants and captains.
Well,
This might be
office
where a
space,
kitchen
common
would be,
area, bunk
right,
area.
and that was to help us figure out, okay, if you're in the bedroom and there's an alarm, how do you get from the bedroom down to the apparatus floor easily? If you're in the chief's office being reprimanded, how do you get to the door so you can be fired? That was the whole,
But so it was
that was the whole setup for that.
All right,
Yeah.
so, I have one more comment, I guess, and then a statement of some sort. Bear with me here. If you're pulling into the right side entrance to the community center, how do you know if there's a space in between those buildings that you can go park in? If that driveway doesn't go completely through, so what happens if that area is full? So then everybody's just going in to vote and turn around that part? I can't.
Just to drive around to find parking.
But, I'm a pretty simple person, so when I look at that, I'm wondering, how do you know if there's a space available in there, or how do you know that there isn't?
You ever in the
Well,
mall
it's-
where they say available space?
It's like, I'm just saying maybe it was jammed together a little quick, that's all. But how do you?
How do you turn around?
Like,
So
what are
there's
you
plenty of
gonna
room
do?
to turn around. Okay, first off, there's plenty of room to turn around.
Well, I
Secondly,
can't wait to see that on voting.
we may not see the same entrance and exits being utilized for voting. We may use the front door instead of using the side door, because there's gonna be more parking at the front. There's gonna be more parking right alongside.
Yeah, but do you see my point?
Yeah.
I don't even guess really need an explanation, because you don't know one, you don't have one, really. But to not have, you be able to drive around in a horseshoe shape there seems, I don't know. Maybe it's because of the way things have to be designed or something, but it just seems strange to me that there's a parking lot that you can't see from the road.
Yeah. Well, you can see into the parking lot
Well,
as you
there's
drive around.
trees all around.
It's not built.
You see my point, it just seems a little hard to, it's hard to conceptualize how, like, when it's voting day and there's a million people running in and out of there. And we don't even know if the community center is still gonna be there. I hate to rain on everybody's parade about spending lots of money, but that, we don't even really know the condition of that building yet and what it might cost to fix it. And what the worst part about this whole entire thing, for me, as a taxpayer, as a board member, is that the fire department is really getting thrown under the bus on this plan. Because it's the biggest need in the entire town is the fire department. I think almost everybody knows that and agrees with that. And now we're looking at, selling this to voters is like just, I don't know a single person that I've talked to that isn't just like, whoa, this number is just crazy. And that includes people on the fire department. There's a lot of extra stuff going in here with, and it's only small numbers, 1.1 or 1.2 million, and then it's just crazy. It's so hard to swallow the fact that there might be a $1.3 million addition to our budget, and we're trying to get our recommendation to tell people to support it, and we don't really know if that's the price. It could be significantly less, but if it could be significantly less, it can also be significantly more. And it's just, I just feel really bad because fire department is what we actually need. And for anybody right now, me, I guess I don't speak for everybody, when everything costs so much more to be adding another $1.3 million to, we're collecting $8 million, so we're collecting another $1.3 million on top of that for taxes. It's so hard to look between the lines here and say, you know what, we really do need it, but who does this drive out next? I mean, I feel like it, I don't know, I wasn't expecting that number any more than anybody else was, I don't think. But like, I almost fell over backwards when I first saw it, like 25 million. And I don't know. I don't know where the answer is. 23 million. It's just such a horrifying number when you figure the community center hasn't been touched yet and it's going to need to be. And we didn't even start with the DPW facility. So where is the answer? And that's what we all have to work and figure out, so that we do get a new fire department, because it's an absolutely desperate need. But for me right now to say, yep, 23 million, everybody should vote yes on this, I can't say in good conscience that I know enough about that to say yes, vote on it. I mean, to say, I'd like to be able to say, yeah, it's Bill Taylor as a selectman or one of the 3 board members knows that we need a fire station, and hopefully by the time we have to vote on it, there's something a lot more reasonable to vote on, rather than say right now, I recommend this because this conversation makes me want to pass out.
So let's end that statement there, and then with the board, can we hold the rest of our questions until after we've heard and can meet on the 15th and seeing what we need to see? And I do know that we have to listen to some of the people in the public who've been waiting really patiently to ask some questions. Leslie, you're going to be second. This gentleman was first. Is that okay with everybody? Thank you. Yes, if you could just state your name for the minute.
Joseph Cox.
Thank you.
My taxes went up 20% last year. I mean, $23 million is ridiculous. It's crazy. It's going to drive me out of town. I mean, the fire department wants everything. They should have a fire department. We built a library for $8 million. They can't build a fire station for $8 million?
Thank you. Leslie?
I just wanted to kind of reiterate what Mandy said, which is, it's a lot to ask us to vote on $23 million when actually the transparent cost, once you get to the community center and the DPW and possibly police, that's the real number. But by kind of dribbling it out in layers, it's not really a transparent process. The other comment I would have is, I think, Janet, you said something about dispatch. Is that right? So you guys are also planning to bring dispatch back into that building?
No. In looking at, if it does become a public safety building, it will include space for dispatch, because police currently dispatch themselves. Currently, we have what we refer to as our radio room, where we have a radio console, we have the receiving equipment for our fire alarm master boxes. There still will be, and one of the slides talked about communication space. That's the communication space that we'll be building at this point in time. It's not, quote, dispatch space.
Okay, because that's, I mean, I remember when I was on CIP, there was a lot of conversation
Yeah.
about moving dispatch and the costs and offsets
Right, oh, yeah, no,
associated with that.
No, that's not,
So-
that's not the intention at this time.
Okay. And so I guess my final comment is to mirror, what this gentleman said about our taxes. I would urge the budget committee and the select board to think really hard and read the room. Is it the right time for us to build a fire station? I know it would cost more, but I could also argue that we could come up with something a lot less elaborate and have the fire station we need without completely doubling our debt load, So I urge you to think very, very hard about that before you say yes this morning.
Thanks, Leslie.
Shane Sigmund again. The thing that there was a comment made when asked about other neighboring towns, the population, what we're serving with this fire station. And it was responded to as if, well, we didn't really look into that. What we looked at was what the fire department needed. And I agree they need a new fire department. But it needs to be reasonable based on the population they actually serve, not a wish list of the best of everything. If other communities are building fire stations that are 15,000 square feet, serving a similar population size, at least investigating how they're doing that at a better price and what we can do to draw this back is what would make me feel a lot better about it. Right now, it feels like we're trying to live like a community of 100 to 200,000 people being funded by 7,000, 8,000 people here. And it's not realistic. It doesn't seem like something that we can sustain. And so I also urge that you need to reevaluate and you need to look at what other communities are doing, not just what would be best based on, the best of everything.
So we did actually, because it was brought to our attention a couple weeks ago, right after we had the Municipal Facilities Task Force meeting, one of the residents said, well, Northampton is building a station, and it's an awful lot smaller than this. They're going to town meeting this year with theirs as well. And why can't we just use their plans and build that station? Northampton is, so I reached out to the Northampton town manager, who I know a little bit, and I asked him, what is your station, what's your service like? I looked at, his reports and whatnot. And their station is a lot smaller. They have 4 full-time staff people on at any given time. They rely on mutual aid responses from the towns of Exeter and Portsmouth and Rye, which they're all neighboring to provide a lot of their additional fire coverage. They have far fewer fire trucks than we have. And they don't have a paramedic level ambulance. They have a basic support ambulance. By comparison, and Ed's going to be able to fill in a lot of these blanks that I'm going to leave out, but by comparison, Peterborough does not have immediately adjacent communities that it can rely on for mutual aid. Our closest neighbors with a comparable size fire service is Keene and Milford in either direction. And in fact, on many, many, many occasions, we are the first responders to many of our neighboring towns for mutual aid when they're unable to get enough of their volunteers out to respond to fire alarms. We do provide ambulance services to 5 communities in total, and we provide that paramedic level interfacility transfer for Monadnock Community Hospital in addition to our regular. So there's a lot of staff that goes into that. A lot of those committees, a lot of those other communities, that are able to build smaller stations are also able to do their training at other facilities. Northampton doesn't do their own training. They go to other facilities to meet their training needs. We are regularly training our staff at our own facilities in town. So again, it looks like they should be the same from the outside because Northampton and Peterborough are relatively the same size. But when you actually look at the services that we're providing out of those facilities, they're incredibly different. Groton is a more urban area, Northampton's a more urban area, Hopkinson's really close to Concord. And you start to break into a lot of those and you start to see that it's not apples and oranges. Sometimes it's apples and pears, but it's definitely not apples and apples.
But the point is we're serving it now, although it's defunct and it's not up to par. But why is the delta so vast between here to there? So it's obviously deficient now and we need to do more and they need a new facility. But are there houses burning down that we're not responding to on time, that we're not helping in time with the facility we have now? So do we need to go to this next level? Is just the only point I was trying to make. Not that we're comparing apples to apples to other things.
One of the things that we're really trying to do is meet the needs of our current operation. One of the things that we're not able to do right now, for instance, we have millions of dollars in equipment in those trucks, and many of them are parked outside, so we're not able to take care of or maintain those. Right now, our fire station is located in the floodplain, not really a place where you want your fire and ambulance to be serving you out of, and in the time of climate change. She talked a little bit about the clean space, dirty space separation. We have none of that. In fact, our overnight paramedics sleep in what used to be a kind of flexible conference room space that is immediately off of the apparatus floor. So when those trucks are driving in and out, you know, where they're sleeping is right there on top of it. That, I guess, you know, what it really comes down to is for you or anyone who has questions about how are we able to meet the needs that we are out of the station that we have, it's really because of the dedication of the staff and their willingness to, you know, to put up with this, knowing that the community is working really hard to, you know, look to meet their needs in the future. We are trying our best. But they're in a really tough facility, and I would really encourage you to, you know, reach out to the fire department and take a tour. At any time, you know, they'd be happy to show you around. And there's, of course, you know, as I said, the video online already, and a whole lot more information on the current setting.
You should, very quickly, you should go see it. Because it is horrifying.
I know.
And I also want to make sure that everybody in the, you know, whoever's listening or watching, the fire department wasn't handed a wish list and they said, you know, and they were like, oh, we'll take all of it. This is a recommendation that was built based on the town of this size, what we serve, and it was this design, or at least preliminary design, is taking into NFPA standards. Everything that fire departments are supposed to have now that building would never. But there's a very vast difference between just picking out the best of everything and having a proposal put in front of you. This is a preliminary proposal. It is not the fire department people that said, let's go crazy and have the world's best fire station everywhere. What the fire station has said over and over and over again is, we're gonna need a new facility because this thing's falling in. And it is. It's horrendous. It's embarrassing for a town like Peterborough to have a facility like that was built as a DPW garage in the 50s.
40s.
It's horrifying. And
1948 to be exact.
well, I meant 50s, 40s, you know, we're only talking a couple of years. So, I mean, it's not like it's this whole glamorous thing that the fire department needs this.
Yeah.
The unfortunate part is that the price just came out at like $23 million.
And I was never putting that on the fire department or saying the firemen said that. I'm talking about everything else going on, like the trees in the front of the community center. Do we need more trees there? There's trees plenty of places. Like, are we just going a little bit of what we'd like to have, or are we only going to what we truly need to have?
Right.
Thanks. So Don, and then Sarah, then... Oh, sorry. Don and Loretta, then Sarah, and you guys are going to remember, and then that gentleman in the front row, and then John Hampson and Ivy, if you can stick around. Oh, and Carol. Who remembered that order? Just please, the honor system.
I was going to say, Nicole hit a lot of what I wanted to say.
Okay.
You compare us to other towns, compare what we have for equipment that we need to protect. Also, as the town grows, what are we going to need through the next 50 years? We have to plan ahead, because it'll be at least another 50 years before this conversation comes up again with most of us aren't going to be here then. But, and some of the other towns you may compare with, well, we have this. Some of the towns, do they have a substation someplace that also has some of their equipment or not? Okay.
Okay, then Loretta. Yeah, thanks.
I have several questions. What are comments? One thing is, I feel like there hasn't been any public input until this meeting. I know you have a task force, but the task force hasn't gone out into the community that I know of. I think if you're going to try to sell this to the community, you have to allow more community engagement and community input, like another public hearing, and show what the design is, because we came into this not knowing anything about
everybody
what
was
being
invited to this
proposed.
meeting.
Yeah, we
Those
had
are wide open.
public information sessions.
We did public information sessions. We held several public information
We
sessions.
leafleted at the dump.
We held public information at the fire station.
Well,
We had a public information session where community was allowed to give input at the community center back in July. There have been, throughout this process with the task force, there have been multiple opportunities for the public to provide input on things they thought were important to the
But
project.
isn't this the first time the public is actually seeing what the proposal is, what the conceptual design is? Because that's what I was asking about.
The design is based
design
upon
to
the
see?
input that was received from the public through both the public hearings and the task force meetings and the programmatic study of the
Well,
use the department.
okay, I'm sharing my opinion.
Okay,
I didn't
that's
go to
fine.
those, and I'm sorry I missed them, but I do think there are issues like what Bill mentioned about the parking for the community center, whether there's even adequate parking when there's an election. You know, have people given feedback about that? Has the town clerk been asked about that? I mean, I think everybody agrees that the fire department needs a better building. But the question is whether, I think $5 million is what needs to be spent at this point. I'm also wondering about the Cold Springs project, because I read in January that the cost on that had gone up like 4.3 million, and that Peterborough's cost had gone up 2.7 million. And I thought you said, Nicole, that there was a grant that made up that difference, but I thought the grant was for $1 million, and that doesn't make up 2.7 million.
We're fully grant funded, so up to the level that was approved at town meeting. So we will not be increasing the water users' costs. I addressed this earlier in the meeting. I guess at this point, if you want to know more about it, you're welcome to send me an email, but we're really focused on this question right now.
Okay, but I mean, I think that's an issue that comes in for everybody. I mean,
No, it doesn't. This is, we're focused on the bond right now, which is taxpayer funded. Coldstone Springs was a bond that was passed at town meeting that is water user rate funded. So they're entirely separate. And again, there is offsetting grants there, so there is no need to increase the amount of that bond.
Okay, well, thanks for the clarification. Yeah.
How many questions did you have, Loretta? Because
That's it,
oh,
that's
that's
fine.
it. Okay. I think Sarah was
Hey,
next.
I'm Sarah Steinberg-Heller. I'm on the task force. I'm on the planning board, and I've served on CIP 2 or 3 rounds. I think 1 unofficially and 2 officially. We definitely talked about this. I agree. We never talked price tag, but when we talked about what had happened in 2004 with the Weller study and stuff, it was abundantly clear to me that we were going to be looking at a pretty big wallop. So I hear that everybody agrees the fire station is needed. That's what everybody always agrees on. Always, since, I mean, Roland can talk about 25 years ago. Everybody agreed that we needed a fire station. So I want to plead, and we did a lot of public outreach, invited the public. I'm sorry that more people didn't come to stuff. I was actually frankly devastated at our community center event, how few people turned out. And I know there wasn't a price tag, but we need to care before the price tag too. And I'm always so disappointed to find out that a lot of people don't care until there's a price tag. And I would urge the budget committee, I'm so psyched, Carl, that you were like, let's meet again, because I really do want you guys to have a chance to review the data. And I urge you to remember how many committees and boards have kicked this can down the road before you lift back your foot and get ready to kick it again. I share your pain, Bill, Rich, I get it, it's huge. I do. I'm not brushing that aside, but somebody has to stop kicking this can. Our firefighters cannot decontaminate their clothing safely. We see hearings on a national level of firefighters dying of cancers and all kinds of dangerous things. Our firefighters don't have space to do that. We spend money on vehicles that go bad sooner because we're not maintaining them properly. Please think about it before you pull back the foot and kick this can down the road. Again, this is really important, even if it hurts, even if it's scary. I know that it's scary, and hopefully the numbers will come down a little bit more. I'm hoping for that. Thanks.
You're next, sir.
Well, she took the thunder right out of me. I'm Paul Tebow. I've lived in this town my whole life on the fire department for 29 years and got done in 2016. Thank you. That was perfect saying. Roland, you know this too. Everybody, we've kicked the can down the road far enough. And at some point, we need to look at the health and safety of the people that are living there now at the fire station. They're not responding in anymore, getting on the ambulance and getting on the fire trucks. We have people living there. And those conditions are not the best conditions at all. And the other piece to that is the living conditions. You have a male and you have a female on duty at the same time. And they're sleeping in the same room with a communical wall dividing them that's really not it's really semi-private, it's not private, so. At the end of the day, we need something here in this town. I own 3 properties in this town. I pay taxes on 3 properties in this town. So I know there's frustrations. But I also know that everybody that's out there in the hallway put a lot on their lives on the line all the time. And from the ambulance to the fire. So this is a fire ambulance station that needs to be built at some point. It's a healthy conversation to have right now. But kicking the can down the road like we have as a town, for so many years, something needs to end. The price tag, Rich, I know is a big wall. It was a big wall to me when I saw it. But at the end of the day,
I'll give you 16.
15 million can do a lot more than 23 million.
Well,
You know, I factored that out over the time, but we just need to do something, so.
Well,
Thank you for,
when I go out to buy something, I have a budget. I really would like nicer trucks, but I have a budget. And I looked at it, and I know you need something. And I looked at it, and I was wishful down at 15. I was like, oh, they might come in at 16. And then they came out at 25 and just blew me out of the water. And 22, you gotta do it the opposite way. I know you guys need a new building. Take 16 and work it backwards. Figure out what you can get for 16, and then you gotta find a number that is, I mean, 16's even hard to eat, but I'm willing to, I'm a contractor. I build things, I know what things cost.
right.
But
We need to build within the guidelines
we
too.
need to get, yes, I understand that.
It's not gonna work.
But do we need all the spaces? I know you need decontamination, you need places to be. But, I mean, it goes back to the ambulance. You gotta have all those ambulances in there because you're doing transfers. I mean, that's a lot of burden that you put on this town that we have to carry as overhead. Yes, they support themselves, but it's still, it's a bigger building, you know? When we first got into this, it wasn't supposed to be a burden to the town. And I understand nobody else can pick it up because it's not, private sector can't handle it. And now it comes to government. But as, I'm not sure what his name is, we're a town of 6,800. To take 22, it's $3,800 every single person. You know, it's just, it's too much. That's all I can say. I mean, I feel for you.
I get that price tag's a lot.
Put 16 on there. I'm all in.
You know, that can be helpful.
Let's negotiate.
I was just listening to Rich talk about, well, I have a budget and I go out and buy it, but what fits in my budget? And I think that's what we all do. But I think that another way to think about this issue is like, I took the roof off my house because I needed a new roof, and in between the time that I took it off and when I put it back on, the price of roofing went up 4 times. I sort of feel like that's the place that we are. We have X number of fire apparati. We have all these ambulances. We have people that work for us. We have that. We can't say, well, it would be better if we had less, because we have it, and we need to house it adequately. And I think it's better to think about it, not that we are embarking on a giant new thing, but that we are right now, with what we have, standing with 1 foot on the dock and 1 foot on the boat. And we gotta move. We've got to move. We can't wait any longer. Yeah, the thing I had my hand up earlier, though, was to say, I would really appreciate it if that corner of Peterborough was more attractive. I'm here for the trees, man. I'll buy a tree.
Oh, there's an idea.
That's a great idea. I will buy a tree.
$22 million?
I will buy, Rich, I'll buy a $250 tree.
Carol
That's
has
a
the
big
next
tree.
tree. Yes.
Carol Nelson, 2 quick questions. Janet, will this presentation be available for people in the town to view? Will it go up on the
Yep.
website?
Yes.
Okay.
It'll be on the website, on the page where we have all the selectmen meeting minutes and whatnot. It'll be up there on the website with the link to the video that is currently being recorded.
Okay.
And then it'll also be on peterboroughprojects.info, which has the page where we're putting all of the material that goes with the studies, the minutes of the facility, task force meetings and whatnot.
Okay, because there's a list of FAQs, is it going to be by that? Okay.
Yeah,
Thank you.
it'll be by all that.
And Chief Walker, you keep talking about this programmatic study.
Yes.
Are you referring to the one from 2005?
So the one from 2005 was updated in 2017 by Warren Street Architecture. The one in 2017 was updated with HKT Architecture this past fall.
Okay, so it is, what you're using
Yes.
is current and
Yeah.
up-to-date. Thank
Yeah.
you. Thank you.
And then Tom was next.
Tom Dardis, I'm a West Peterborough resident, former member of the department, not currently. I've been in EMS now for 33 years. I have worked cities, I have worked rural areas, I have worked in various different places in the country and a couple of places overseas that I'd rather not mention. I can tell you in all that time that Peterborough is a very unique spot with regard to EMS. And when you look at populations, there's two populations you have to realize. Yes, the population of Peterborough is roughly 6,800. So when it comes to fire population that this department is responsible for, you have to count the population of both Peterborough and Sharon, because the last I knew, we're also the primary for Sharon in terms of fire. The EMS population is over 10,000, because remember, you have to include with regard to the ambulances, 13.5. So it's gone up since the last time I looked at the numbers. So that's where the number of ambulances that we have is supporting that particular population. In terms of EMS, the EMS in this area is very unique compared to other places. Because of our location and the distance to certain tertiary care centers, there are capabilities that Peterborough has that a lot of other EMS services do not have the luxury of being able to provide, or the necessity, I should say, to even provide. There are times when some of these transports, even the 911s, that don't necessarily go to Monadnock Hospital. So these EMS providers are in the back of these trucks with people for an hour or more. Most of the traumas that they pick up here actually go straight to Worcester because that's the closest level 1 trauma center. So that kind of distance, those kinds of things with regard to wear and tear on vehicles, and that's why you need the amount of ambulances that you have. So that's why you need to make sure you have the kind of space to support that. Right now, there's at least one ambulance that's parked outside all the time because there's no place to put it inside. And I can tell you from experience, when you park an emergency vehicle outside for that kind of time, you really cut back on the life of that particular piece of apparatus. When you talk about what you were saying, like, here's the number, work backwards from there. I have worked for various fire departments in multiple states that have gone through this process, that have done just exactly what you said. This is what the town's given you, let's work backwards from here. And I would have to say, the majority of the time that people do that, you always end up with shortfalls that you're going to have to compensate for later and spend more money later to fix because of those shortcuts that you have to make. Whether it's a filtration system or space for whatever. Right now, for example, we're talking about like space for cleaning equipment. They only have one extractor there. So they have one basic washing machine essentially for all of the fire gear. The bathroom situation, there's 2 bathrooms, one for each, but there's only also one shower in each. When these guys come back from a fire, you're talking about a ladder truck full of people, an engine full of people, ambulances. They can't do anything with that. So they're going home with all this stuff to get cleaned up there. So you need this space to be able to make all this happen. I have been probably half of the meetings that have been out to the public. And I can tell you, yes, this is a scary number, but I don't really honestly believe that if you try to cut back on what is in the plans already, you are going to end up later spending money again trying to make up for those shortcomings. And we already know, and it's already been discussed, that I think we all agree that the longer you make this go down the road, it's going to be even more expensive. And imagine what the number's going to be in 5 years if we don't do it now. That number, I guarantee, is gonna scare everybody, if not this number already. So I really think that understanding that this number is what it is, that it's really, in terms of what was discussed, what the department needs. The other stuff with regard to the site plan and so on and so forth, safety was discussed. One of the things that I made comment in one of those meetings was the fact that the good idea of having that separate entrance way over to the right when you looked at the map is that community center is always busy. There's always something going on over there. Whether it's a meeting, whether it's a public event, whether it's voting, all of that stuff doesn't change the fact that these 911s happen, okay? You do not have a full-time fire department. You have a full-time EMS side, but you do not have a full-time fire department. So when these things happen, people have to respond from their homes to the station. So the further you separate the traffic of people going in and out of that community center and emergency traffic responding to the station and then out of the station, the safer it's going to be for everybody. So I know it looks weird, but I can tell you that from being in the meetings and from my time in EMS, that's probably one of the best fitting site plans that I've ever seen. And I know the number's scary, but I really don't honestly think that you can cut back anywhere with regard to the building. And that's just my opinion.
Can I just say something to clarify? Everybody knows that we right now are not deciding yes or no to build a new fire department. I think everybody here is in complete agreement that we desperately need a new fire department. What's down there is dangerous as all hell for those guys. That we all agree on. We're not the people that are deciding on this. There's 6,800 people that have to decide on this, whether or not, however many of them are going in there. I think I think all of what you guys are saying is excellent to hear some different perspective. You particularly, Tom, because that was, if I didn't know any better, I'd swear you were just paid for that.
No, I can guarantee you that.
But I mean, I don't think anybody has that. So you're like, okay, we're saying no to this right now. Nobody wants to say no to it. Nobody does. And we are not here to say yes or no. We're not, it's the whole town has to decide this. And if I'm a person that doesn't normally sit behind this table, I want to know that I know that a ton of thought has gone into it, but it's very preliminary. There's no question about the need, and there's no question that it's going to hurt. And there's no question that everybody here on either side has the right to say, ouch, when you look at a $23 million price tag. And that's all we're saying. They're like, oh my, ow. That hurts. I mean, it's a scary number. There's no doubt about the need. Nobody questions that. It's just, I think we're perfectly within our rights to be blown away by that number.
Is there anybody else that hasn't asked a question or spoken? I'll start calling up John. Yes.
I'm going to stand up because I'm more comfortable standing. I apologize in advance. The first thing I wanted to recognize was we've got about 25 or maybe 30 staff members that have either been in the hall or watching on video. And those are folks that are answering over 2,900 calls a year. And they've taken a lot of time to come to this meeting because they're supportive of this project. And I just want to recognize them because they've had a horrendous couple of years. So. Second of all, before the gentleman leaves, we've had some great, excellent, thoughtful, intelligent discussions tonight, and we're so lucky in Peterborough to have folks that care enough to want to go through this and go through this process. I've been a firefighter since 1978, and during that time, as Roland has said and Deputy Tebow has said, this has been kicked down the road, and it's been kicked down the road and kind of put under the rug. And I'm just so grateful that we are here having this discussion because we've never gotten this far before.
Right.
We've never gotten this far. We have the support of Chief Walker, the town administration, and the town fathers. I do know in my heart that we will get and we will move this project forward somewhere, somehow. And all of us that are here have to remain positive and work together to make this happen. And we're doing that, and we're so lucky to be doing that. So that's like a thank you to everybody in the room. The last point I want to make is I've been going through these old town reports, and it's quite interesting, and I just want to compare and contrast for history's sake, because I think it's important. When we moved into our fire station, which was the DPW facility in 1972, we had 43 calls a year, and now we do over 2,900 calls a year. Our mission has changed, and the gentleman that left with his wife kind of questioned what our mission is and why we're doing so much, and this fellow right here, the taxpayers have asked us to do this mission. They call 911. They have these emergencies, and you know, anything that happens, who do you call? You call the fire department. They'll come fix the problem. We have paramedics that fix problems. Some people in this room have had problems fixed by our department to the point where it saved their lives. And we just need to figure out how to move this forward as a team. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. Thanks, Laura, you're next, and then Carol.
My name's Laura Gingrass. I live in Peterborough and I work at Monadnock Community Hospital. Just a quick word about the value that the service does bring to the town, in my opinion. The ambulance service has gotten larger over the years, and when they took on being the transport from Monadnock Community Hospital, that's why they had to get larger. And we are so lucky, we have such an incredible service in this town. When the ambulances go out and respond to an emergency, they're communicating with our professionals in the emergency department seamlessly, and together working on the plan for what's best for the patient, where's the best place to bring the patient. And we're really lucky for that. A lot of people don't really see that side of it. And their Peterborough ambulance is just a real pleasure to work with, and I feel like our patients are getting much better care, and that our residents are lucky that we've got that caliber of folk responding to us, to our emergencies. And then the transport out of the hospital, yes, that has increased the cost, but again, I think for the whole, it just has really increased the caliber, and that's something we should value. Thank you.
Carol, have a follow-up?
Yeah, one last question. Of this $22,344,000, will there be detailed breakdown of what this entails prior to town meeting so residents can take a look at that number?
We'll have more detailed estimates,
Yes,
yes.
yes, we will have
Absolutely,
it.
yes. That's the work that Janet and her team will be undertaking over the next month and a half.
Sarah?
Just, Bill, when you said that you guys aren't saying yes or no, I totally agree with that. It is up to the 6,800 residents. But you guys also do have the power to demonstrate that you aren't as a committee kicking the can down the road again by having that budget committee recommends, and maybe it's not something to zero, maybe it's split still, but you guys do have a say once you talk about it and go over the stuff on the 14th, I think you agreed, or the 15th. But I think it's important to not be like, you are making part of it. We need to keep going with this. So there is some power in that decision that you're gonna make, and it may be that it's just a hard no. But I would encourage you, as I did before, to make sure that you really look at the gravity of what you're saying no to, if that's the choice you make.
Point, thanks, sir. Rick had something to add, and then I think it looks like everybody that is gonna speak has. So Rick can say what he has to say, then we'll end this portion of the public hearing on that, and then we'll move on to our next portion of the meeting.
We'll move on to a decision about the next portion.
Yeah, like Sarah just said, and Bill, I think, made a really good point. I mean, the bottom line here is if we do approve this, we have to sell it to the town. And I would feel much more comfortable, and I'm not sure if this is completely unrealistic to ask you folks, but what would we give up if we said, instead of a 30,000 square foot plan like we did, what if it was a 20,000 square foot plan? What would we lose by doing that? I would love to know that, because that would give me a much better understanding of what we're getting for value. And conversely, or alternately, what if we only spent $16 million? What will we end up sacrificing? You know, if you said, okay, we can only have 16 of the 23, what are we going to lose?
So, let me,
And I'm not asking you necessarily to say right now, but maybe
Yeah.
something in the next couple of weeks you guys can kind of brainstorm a little bit, because that would just help me, again, have a much clearer understanding of what we're going to be dealing with.
I understand that, and I wish we had the time to ask Janet and her team to give us, 3 different scenarios that would address that. As it is, we're really pushing to get something that is as refined as possible before May town meeting. So ask them to, conceptualize what it could look like at this price tag or what it could look like at that price tag is only going to take away from the work that they're able to do on this plan before May town meeting. It's
I'm just
so
asking
much
maybe in the
more.
next 2 weeks, if we could just kind of ballpark that type of thing for us.
So one thing we could do is the programmatic study is based on square footage needed for those various things. So I think it goes back to the fact that the space that is in that building is dedicated to something that we do. So really what it comes down to is what space do we eliminate to get down to 20,000 square feet? And then how does that impact our ability to deliver our service?
Exactly.
And that's really what the question comes down to. And is the savings in space worth the loss of the service? And that's the decision. So I mean, yes, in a sense, you can look at that 30,000 square feet was built based on X square feet for apparatus, X square feet for administrative space, for mechanical space, for IT space, for all of those things that go into a building. So there is the ability to look at some of those and determine what programmatic part of our job you no longer wish us to do. And
Right, and then if you say,
and that
this is what you
becomes a
really
cost,
say-
if you will.
Right, but then we
Yeah.
could go ahead, you would go ahead and tell us that, and then we go to our voters and say, hey, this is why it has to be 23
So
million,
that
because
is-
we would lose
so-
A, B,
And that'll be
and C.
part of, as you asked for that programmatic, that actually is, it's an Excel spreadsheet that lists square footage based upon what the various functions are that we perform as an organization.
I will add something. So Chief, I've seen a trend where fire apparatus are getting small. And we have a fleet of equipment that ranges in size. Are we considering the smaller aspect of the future of fire equipment?
Your engine's gonna be about $1 million to replace. I'd be happy to make it smaller. All those in favor?
I'm saying eventually we'll need to do-
Potentially in the future, yeah, we could. The other piece we look at too is where we have 2 engines right now, a tanker and a ladder truck. The ability to deliver what we do is based on that. So again, I'll use a word that is not often used, if you look from a regional approach, there's equipment we do not have because Jaffrey has it on their heavy rescue. Jaffrey doesn't have a ladder truck because they know that we automatically go to every chimney fire in Jaffrey along with every structure fire in Jaffrey, and their rescue comes to most motor vehicle accidents within traffic because it supplements that equipment and that. So I think that the short answer is, yes, there is the ability to economize stuff, but it really comes down to what level of service needs to be provided and how can we provide that.
Sure. Okay, great answer. Let's end this portion of the public hearing. That comes to a close. And then up next, you'll have a presentation on the draft warrant and votes to recommend.
I'm gonna ask you, since we're here nearly at 9 o'clock, and I know there was a request by some to perhaps leave in time for the State of the Union address, we could still do that.
I said
Since-
7 a.m. I said 7.
I know, and we completely blew through that one. There was no getting around that. Since the Budget Committee and the Select Board is going to be meeting again on the 15th, we could postpone the votes to recommend until that time, or we could continue to move forward and do that tonight. I guess I would take a straw poll on that first before I move on to this presentation. I don't think this is going to take particularly long. But again, since you are meeting again before you address the bond article.
Raise your hand to stay and finish tonight.
All right, decision.
All right, so thank you, everybody. A lot of information came across our plates tonight. A lot of great questions. A lot of good testimony. And thank you, Nicole, for doing all that.
Yeah, pretty much, that's what I was gonna say. Yeah, you're satisfied with how it played out? Hey, Bill, did you walk down?
There's no expectation.
You didn't? No, I've got a ride. I was gonna offer you a ride.
I actually meant to talk about the fact that we have equipment that we
Everybody else does like two.
I haven't eaten either. You serving over at your house? Is that what I'm hearing? Sure.
I don't know. I haven't even discussed that. Come in, leave a box of 50.
Walk through my office. A new fire station, we absolutely must have a new fire station. Nobody's gonna buy.
It's not the issue. The thing is, I want to be able to defend whatever decision I make, and I can't do that at the moment.
No, I agree. So,